Before proceeding with the formal business of the meeting, I would like to invite Pastor Segun Doherty, Resident Pastor, Redeemed Christian Church of God, Victory Centre for All Nations, Parish Luton, to lead us in prayer.
Thank you.
Would all members remain standing?
When I first came to Luton in 1999, and the work of the ministry was to start here in Luton, upon spiritual mapping, we engage in praying to God to reduce, if not eliminate, crime rates in Luton. I'm eternally grateful that things are getting better because of the efforts of the leadership from the CEO to the mayor and wonderful people like you, and we are grateful. Shall we pray? Almighty and everlasting God, we give you thanks and praise for all your mighty works. You are loving, you are good and gracious. Thank you for creating us and sustaining us day by day. Thank you that you made us in your image to exist in community with other people. We thank you for Luton Town. Thank you for our elected officials, right from the CEO, the mayor, the deputy mayor, the councillors, businesses, churches, mosques, families, and individuals that make our town a great place that it is. I pray this evening that our civil servant will acknowledge this calling and perform it faithfully. We ask that you be our judges, be with our judges and our attorneys and in law enforcement. Grant that they will never neglect or abuse the authority, but that they will stand firm for truth and justice. Keep them safe from harm as they serve our community. I pray for this council meeting tonight, that you give the council member wisdom and guidance as they deliberate on the items before them. May every decision be righteous in your sight, for our benefit and for your glory. I pray for peace for our youth and young adults in this borough, and they will be involved, that they will no longer be involved in criminal acts, but live a fulfilled life. I pray for peace in Middle East between Israel, Palestinian, Gaza, Lebanon. Lord, let there be peace. Let there be peace in Sudan. Between Russia and Ukraine, let there be peace. Let there be peace, oh Lord, in Africa and Pakistan and all over the world. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen.
Please be seated. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome to the meeting our two newly elected councillors. For the Barnfield Ward, Councillor Anwar Malik, and for the Wigmore Ward, Councillor Idris Latif. Before we begin, would members please sit in their allocated seats, silence their mobile phones, stand up when speaking, switch microphones on to speak and off immediately afterwards. If there is an emergency, turn left out of the chamber, follow the green emergency exit signs to the main town hall entrance and assemble in St George's Square. Please note this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Any members of the public present are entitled to take photographs, film, audio record and report on the business held in public, but must not act in a disruptive manner. If they do so, they may be asked to leave. First item of business is to receive the minutes of the meeting of the Council on the 23rd of July 2024, set out on pages 7 to 9. Do all members agree the minutes as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you. This side. Are there any apologies for absence?
Madam Mayor, I've received apologies from Councillors Ahmed, Bridgen, Lovell, Nicole, Zainab Raja and Umi Ali.
Madam Mayor, there's apologies for Councillor Keynes.
And to add to Councillor Keynes, thank you. Members, please note that voting today will be by exception. Rather than calling out each member's name to record their vote, I will ask members to indicate if they wish to vote against a motion. If no member votes against, I will declare the item carried. The outcomes will not be recorded in the minutes unless 6 members of the Council indicate that they wish for this to happen in accordance with Standing Order 21.2. I'm pleased to announce that the Council have been re-awarded the Member Development Charter Plus by the East of England Local Government Association for a further period of 3 years. It's my pleasure to present the award to Councillor Mahmood Hussain and Anne Loeffler on behalf of the 5 members and the 5 officers of the Member Development Strategic Group. May I invite Councillor Mohammed Hussain and Anne Loeffler to come to the dais to receive the award, please. Members are advised that invitations for my next charity event will shortly be sent out for a karaoke night, women only, on Thursday, the 21st of November 2024 at the Basement Function Room, Hat Factory, Bute Street from 6 p.m. Light bites will be provided and soft drinks available. It will be a charity event. As members will be aware, I have agreed to take an item of urgent business this evening to allow members to receive a presentation from the Police and Crime Commissioner of Bedford, John Tizard. Questions to the Police and Crime Commissioner following his presentation will need to be contained in a 30-minute time frame because of the volume of business on the agenda this evening. I now invite the Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire, Mr. John Tizard, to make a presentation to the meeting.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and it's great to be here amongst councillors. I was a councillor for nearly 20 years, and local government runs through my blood. And as a Police and Crime Commissioner, I see one of my prime roles is to work in partnership with local authorities and councillors. So today is a great opportunity to put that into practice, and I hope to have a dialogue. I'm going to speak relatively briefly, but then I hope to hear from you, because what I really want to hear about, what are the issues in terms of police and criminal justice in Luton? What could we be doing better? How can we work together even more effectively than we do? And we do work very effectively already. I thought it would be helpful just to remind ourselves what the Police and Crime Commissioner is and what he or she is not. And I know everyone in the room will know it, but I sometimes forget, so it's quite useful to remind myself. The role is a strategic role, so I have no operational responsibility. I cannot direct the Chief Constable or any police officer. I cannot intervene in any particular criminal case or incident. What I can do and must do is to set the strategy for policing and the wider criminal justice system in the county, hold the Chief Constable to account for the delivery of an efficient and effective police service, and to set the budget for policing and consequently the council tax precept element or the policing element of the council tax. One of the main responsibilities of a Police and Crime Commissioner is to set a 4-year strategy through what is called the Police and Crime Plan. And this sets out my ambition for policing and the wider criminal justice system in the county for the period of my office, which goes through to May 2028. In doing this, I have determined that this will be a plan that has the ambition of getting a fairer, more just Bedfordshire, to address inequality and social injustice as much as it does to address criminal justice, because in my view, you can't address criminal justice unless you address the underlying social contributors. And I hope very much, as you'll hear, my plan very much aligns with your 2040 vision, which I'm very pleased and proud to be a supporter of. So a safer and fairer Bedfordshire. That's the next slide, please. What I have done, as I say, is that twin approach of social and criminal justice. We know if you're poor, if you're marginalized, you're more likely to be the victim of crime. You're also more likely to be enticed into crime. And that's not to say if you're poor or marginalized, you're going to be a criminal, but the reality is you're more likely to be enticed into crime. And we know that is a big issue in this county, in this town, and indeed across the country, and indeed beyond this country. So that twin approach of social and criminal justice, which I think plays very much to the strategy, the policies and the values of this council. I see on your wall everything there, building an inclusive society, improving population well-being, very much reflected in the plan. Now, if we're going to achieve the kind of ambition I have, and I'll talk a little bit more about the detail of the plan, but not all the detail, because I've heard Madam Mayor say the time is limited and you don't want to be here all evening. We have to have whole system change. We can't arrest ourselves out of social problems. We can't arrest ourselves out of many criminal problems. We have to tackle them in a collaborative way, addressing those causes. That requires a collaborative approach. The police, myself, working in partnership with the council and with the other councils in the county, working in partnership with the health service, working in partnership with the wider criminal justice system, and also working with businesses and the community and voluntary sector. I place a huge value on the relationship that Bedfordshire Police has with this council. I know it has brought value to the people of Luton. It has helped the police deliver a fairer and safer town, and I hope it's enabled you to feel as a council that you're also creating a fairer and safer Luton. We have to work together. Earlier today, I chaired the local criminal justice board, which brings together all the agencies, including the borough council, the court service, the CPS, and I could go on, to see how we can forge one approach to dealing with some of the big and almost intractable challenges we have in terms of crime and impact on victims, impact on society. I've divided my plan into 6 core missions. I keep pushing the button thinking I'm staying in the slide, and I know I've got a very good assistant who's doing that very admirably. So apologies for that, and thank you, Councillor Taylor. I've done 2 other things. I've actually got, I'm cheating in a way, because I'm meant to have a 4-year plan, and I'm actually having a 6-month plan and a 3-year plan. The reason for that is the plan that takes us from now to March of 2025, and a plan that would take us from April of 25 through to 28. The reason for doing that, there are several reasons. One of the principal reasons is I want to get even closer alignment between my plan, our plan, and your plan, your community safety plan, and your other plans. And I know, having attended your community safety partnership executive, there is a will and a desire to get that alignment. And the same applies in the rest of the country, but we'll have to work at that. The second is it gives me a greater chance to consult and talk to wider stakeholders and the public. We've just had an inspection of the Bedfordshire Police, a bit like a school waiting for Ofsted. We wait for that result. It might be not until the new calendar year, but I would want to reflect the inspectorate's views and recommendations for Bedfordshire in the forward plan. I also want to ensure that the plan, fits in with government objectives. We know some of those are emerging, more will emerge, and hopefully the budget, because a plan that isn't underpinned by a budget is not worth anything. It's just an aspirational list. So I'm very keen on that. So what are the core elements? The first is prevention, and I don't think I need to explain to a group of councillors or to a council why prevention is important. If we can prevent crime, we get a societal benefit. We get a benefit for the potential victims of crime. We also get a benefit from the people who might have fallen into crime, but we get a benefit for all the agencies involved too, financial and in terms of outcomes. But we can't deliver prevention through the police alone. That has to be collaboration. We need to put victims at the heart of the system, not just in terms of policing, but the wider criminal justice system. How can it be right in 2024 that a woman who has been raped may have to wait 3 or 4 years from the incident to get to court? Just not acceptable. We've got to improve the whole way we operate. But there are other ways in which we have to put victims at the heart of this system. We also need to tackle violence against women and children, women and girls in particular. And on both tackling victims and our ambition to halve violence against women and children by 50% over 10 years, in line with the previous government's target and the current government's target, I'm very pleased that your colleague, Councillor Yumi Ali, my deputy PCC, is leading on that within my office. Reinvigorating local policing. Every councillor I talk to, every doorstep I knock on, people tell me they want better local policing, better community policing. For me, it would be great to have more community police officers, and I hope over time we will. I think it's what we need is a cultural shift. The relationship of those officers to communities, communities to those officers, higher visibility, more accountability, more joint working and problem solving. And again, those officers working with voluntary organisations, local businesses, councils, and your officers and others to solve problems in areas. And that will take time, but by April of next year, I hope to have a specific plan for enhancing local policing across the county. And then tackling serious crime. And I don't need to remind you in Luton that we have, and not just in Luton, but across the county, some of the most serious crime relative to any other part of the county. More gun crime in Bedfordshire than the rest of the east of England put together. More serious organised crime gangs. If we don't tackle that, we won't tackle the antisocial behaviour that we all want to see. We won't actually get a safer community. So we've got to put effort into that. And obviously, allied to that is we must make sure we've got the resources for counter-terrorism as well. And then excellence. And I want to see an excellent police service. And for me, it'd be great to get outstanding for every 9 categories from the inspectorate. I expect no force has ever done that. But it's more than that. It's public confidence in the police. It's the kind of response we saw in August when communities in this town and across the county felt really threatened by far-right thuggery, that they knew the police were there on their side. And we saw that, and I saw that when I walked around with some councillor colleagues around Bury Park the following week. That sense of reassurance, I think that's really important. So it's these elements and how we use resources effectively. We may want more money, but the money we have, we must use effectively. And the second is excellence, is to attempt to rebuild the broken criminal justice system. There'll be limits to what we can do in Bedfordshire alone on that, but we can do a lot. But we will be relying very much on the government and government funds to make that work. So that's overarching the approach that I've got. What I'm really keen to understand that is how we can build greater collaboration, both at the strategic level and at operational level, between Bedfordshire Police, the wider criminal justice services, and Luton Borough Council. I know we have done a great deal, and I'm proud of what's been done, and you should be proud of what's been done, both as members and Robbie and his team as officers. But we can do more, and we must do more if we're going to serve the people who we are all elected to serve. So my role is to be the voice and the champion of the community, not the voice of the police into the community. To do that, I need to work with you. You know what's going on in Luton far better than I can. That's not just because I happen to live in central Bedford and have an office in Bedford. It's actually, even if I lived in Luton, you know far more about your communities and your neighbourhood. I look to every councillor in this county to be eyes and ears for me, to tell me what's going on, so I can be responsive and I can champion the interests of the community. And I'm really proud of what we can achieve, and really optimistic about what we can achieve here in Luton. And I have to say, I spent 7 hours on patrol with a response team overnight, Friday night into Saturday morning here in Luton. actually some excursions into Dunstable and Hampton regions as well. What struck me was most of the cases that we went to, or the officers went to, I just went as an observer, were ones which actually were not primarily policing. They were ones which were children's services, adult social services, NHS mental health services. And it just demonstrated to me and just reinforced how collaboration is the answer. It's not just having more police officers traveling around, even walking the streets. Important as that is us working together. So that's by way of introduction. Very happy to take any comments, any questions you may have. And I just preface, if the questions are operational, I can take a note and report those on to the police. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Right, the first hand I saw was yours, James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Police and Crime Commissioner, for coming in today. I want to thank him for his engagement in Luton so early in his term, and I look forward to him to come visit Luton Town Centre again on Thursday when we're going to discuss the issues the town centre faces. And I have to say, it is a marked improvement on his predecessor, who seemed allergic to Luton, unless, of course, there was a photographer in tow. But can the PCC assure me that he understands the policing challenges faced in Luton, particularly in the town centre, and that his crime plan recognises the strategic challenges and allocates the necessary priorities to it? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I did notice some people taking a photograph of me earlier, so I have to be careful about making comments about photography. I'm looking forward to meeting the Luton Bid officers from the council and police officers on Thursday, when we're going to discuss issues about safety and policing in the town centre. And again, that's another example of how we have to work together to make that happen. No one agency can do that. And I'm pleased to be part of that. I said recently, and I think the mayor was witness to me saying it very recently, I almost feel like an honorary Lutonian over the last 6 months, because I've spent a lot of time in Luton and proud to have done so. Luton is a very important part of this wider county. And all right, I might say that in a cheeky way when I go to Bedford too. However, I genuinely believe it. I think we've got and the plan, I think, will address the issues of Luton. And part of the reinvigorating local policing will be to have an even greater town centre presence. Now, clearly, resources are always going to be a constraint. Until we get more resources, the big challenge is, and I can do my best to persuade the Chief Constable, but do you take resources from counter-terrorism or attacking serious crime to deal with some of the other issues? And this is the big balance. But absolutely. And I want to hear from you, and I want to hear on Councillor Taylor on Thursday what the real needs are of the town and how we can make that work.
Well, thank you, John, for a very informative presentation. The 3 councillors for the Barnfield and Bushmead area for many years had a very close working relationship with the local police team. So close, in fact, that, bearing in mind that there are 2 further education colleges in the ward, there were periods where social tensions were a bit higher than they should be. And it wasn't unusual for the PC to phone us. We didn't have to contact her all the time. I have to tell you now, don't even know the names of the officers that are supposed to be looking after our area. Haven't got a clue. What plans do you have, please, to help us to restore the relationship that we enjoyed for many years?
I could dodge that and say that's an operational issue, because it's how police are deployed and how they operate is a matter for the Chief Constable, but I'm not going to do that. In terms of the plan and the commitment I talked about earlier in terms of reinvigorating local policing, it's the very point you make, Councillor. We want police officers and indeed PCSOs who play in it, and we need a lot more of those. We are very depleted in terms of those that element of the force currently. Working in areas, probably smaller areas than they're currently working, having a very close relationship with elected councillors, and clearly in the more rural areas with parish and town councils as well. And working, so you are, there is a constant dialogue. You're saying I think there's a problem around there, or I know that issue. and they're also pointing some of those issues out to you. So I hope that will come. I can't magic it, overnight, but that's certainly my ambition. And I think you'll see that come through in terms of the strengthening and revitalising of local policing. And in terms of the particular wards, I mean, I can take back and have a conversation with the superintendent responsible for local policing in Luton. I will do that.
Alia, please. Sorry.
Thank you. Welcome, John, and thank you for taking the time for presenting your plans and your missions and reporting on the subsequent progress of that. I also wanted to take this opportunity to once again congratulate you on your successful election win. So now that I've got the valid pleasantries out of the way, let's move on to the accountability part and ask some questions. And I'm pleased to see that one of your missions is to tackle and reduce violence against women and children. However, with that in mind, I wish to know what steps the office has taken to ensure the entire demographic of Luton is supported, particularly for women and children who present language barriers and are often missed because of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for congratulating me on what seems a long time ago when Robin declared I was elected. Must be nearly 6 months ago. And a lot of things have happened since then. In terms of address, I mean, and I say Councillor Ali is leading on this as the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. We need to do an awful lot more to reduce crime against women and children, and particularly girls. It's on the increase in the county. Domestic abuse is on the increase, and partly the positive element of that is that women are having more confidence to report. So there's more reporting, but that doesn't mean we're tackling. We've got to take much bolder steps. And we know nationally, we just saw a report from the inspectorate on rape conviction or solving rape crimes nationally a few weeks ago. And Bedfordshire is is one of the better performing forces, but we've got a long way to go. Nationally, it's in a really poor place, and that's not acceptable. I think in terms of working with communities, again, it goes back to what, this collaboration. You as a council will know, and you'll know organisations and work with organisations, voluntary and community organisations, that will know communities far better than the police do. And how do we get in? How do we build that confidence, particularly with women and families to come forward? How do we really strengthen the relationship between your children's services and police in terms of tackling child abuse? How do we strengthen the relationship between the police and your adult services in dealing with protecting vulnerable adults? And I think we've got a long way to go on that. But I can assure you that if we, I will have failed if we don't make big strident inroads. And we know we're going to get a very big stick in terms of violence if we don't, not just from you, by someone called Yvette Cooper, who wields a pretty hefty stick, I think. So we'll certainly be on that case.
Okay, we'll go next to Ghulam Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I say, first of all, Commissioner, thank you for coming down and speaking to us. I really welcome your collaborative approach. It's a marked difference from your predecessor, so thank you for that. I welcome your crime plan. I think it's a good approach and a robust plan, and collaboration was quite key to what you were saying there. So I just wondered whether you can give us some examples of when you say collaboration, what are you doing with the statutory bodies? And then what are you doing to engage the third sector? Because you're going to need everybody working together to actually deliver your crime plan.
I normally get questions from you at the Police and Crime panel, so it's good to have one from you this evening. In terms of that collaboration, clearly the formal approaches, I'm a member of the CSP executive, and in fact, for all three. So I think that's part. I talked about the Criminal Justice Board today. We are involved either through the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner or through the police in an absolute labyrinth of joint working arrangements, committees, boards, and we could spend all night listing all those. So we need to do that. I think we have to do more. And for me, collaboration, I was saying that this morning at the Criminal Justice Board, we can all sign up, can't we? And we all do it. I mean, we'll sign the memorandum of understanding. We're all going to work brilliantly together. But actually, what we don't then finish on to the next step of what's the practical plan to get an outcome. What commitment are we making, whether we're the council, the police, the health service, the probation service, whoever, to making that, what are we going to contribute? What resources are we going to put into that relationship? And I think that's where we have to get, there's some good examples of that, but we have to go much further. And again, I'm very keen to work with the community and voluntary sector. I'd be looking to people like yourself, Councillor, and to the council to help introduce me to the most appropriate ones. We have a good network. I'm really interested to hear from and talk to the people we don't normally hear from and talk to. And I think, sometimes we get in echo chambers and sometimes we talk to the same organisations and they may be, many of them are brilliant, don't get me wrong, but actually it's how do we reach out and reach out. I know we talked to officers in this council when we were consulting on the plan who gave us really good advice on engagement and in consultation with wider groups, but we've got a lot further to go.
Councillor Amjad Ali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for coming down. It's a pleasure to see that you're open-minded and willing to listen to some of the criticism that may come your way. So in terms of, my question is around the Neighbourhood Watch, which I've had several complaints from our residents. That seems to be pretty much non-existent at the moment. Would you be willing to support other watch organizations in county or in?
I know there are particular issues in terms of Neighbourhood Watch in Luton, and I will not stray into talking about those particularly because I think there's some legal and other issues involved with those. Neighbourhood Watch is really important, and indeed, through my office, we fund Neighbourhood Watch. My office has been talking to officers from this council about how we might have a joint approach to address some of the issues, particularly in Luton, because again, I wouldn't want to do something that was different at variance from what you were doing through your community safety partnership approach. So that's really important. I'm looking to convene a meeting of all the Neighbourhood Watch organisations across the county, because they're stronger in some parts of the county than they are in others. I'm really conscious that Luton at the moment may have some more informal. I'm also conscious that there's a national organisation and national standards, and I wouldn't want to stray from those. But I really hope, in partnership with the council, we can find a way to get a good Neighbourhood Watch which meets the criteria of Neighbourhood Watch, has the proper accountability, and has a proper level of support. But the accountability really matters.
Councillor Aslam Khan.
Thank you very much, Lady Mayor. I had a whole list of questions, but you have instructed us that we have to limit our questions. If you allow me 2 questions, please. Normally, yeah.
Aslam Keith.
Yeah, I'll keep them short and sharp. This is time for us to hold our PCC to account.
Okay, so
and our members and the residents deserve to hear.
Indeed.
Yeah,
so
please allow me. Yes. I haven't even started in shutting me down.
I'm not shutting you down, Aslam.
So I should not be quiet. If you don't want me to ask, you can sit down. Otherwise, this meeting is designed to ask questions and to hold people to account. If that's not going to be allowed, then I'd rather sit down and not speak. If you allow me, I can ask those questions.
Okay,
My question.
Aslam, sorry, 2 questions are absolutely fine. I was not going to.
Thank you so much.
But would you stick to the question?
Yeah, I will stick to the questions. Like everyone else, I have to put a context before I ask a question. So it's not something I'm doing anything new. It's something which has been done in the past, and we should not be setting new precedents. So the first thing, we had to limit our time because we couldn't fit you in the future agendas. You were not available. And I can see marked improvement, putting 4 slides and following a camera around in the town centre because the victims don't get to see you, and we're not going to see you for the rest of the year. So my question is, what will you do differently for victims of crime? Because violence crime is on the increase. There's so many people who have been impacted with this crime. So what will you do differently? Secondly, to your previous predecessor, we know the funding model is not right for Bedfordshire Police and they're underfunded. So your predecessor got record level of funding for the past 3 years, and last year, this police force was the only force in the country to get that funding. What will you do to get more money? Because all those plans that you're putting in place are not going to be enforceable or implemented if the police do not get the right resources. So 2 things. What will you do for victims of crime? And the second thing is, how will you put those resources? Because those forced lives, I'm afraid, not going to solve the crime that people face in Luton.
In terms of your opening remarks, I have been to Luton many times since I was elected. I will come to Luton many more times. I have walked the streets, I've talked to residents, I've talked to shopkeepers and businesses. And as I say, I was out with a response team over the weekend. And my commitment is to return. I am available. I will come back to this council on a regular basis, as much as, well, on a regular basis. I can't come to every council meeting. You wouldn't want me at every council meeting. And this one has been in the diary for some time. Well, it was on the 24th of September, then had to move. I know the council got moved. And I've also attended the safety partnership, and I've been to your scrutiny panel as well. So I will continue that dialogue and available to any member of the council, irrespective of party or ward. In terms of victims, as I said, we've got to do more. We've got to actually ensure the Bedfordshire Police honour and fulfil the Victims' National Code. And we are doing that, but we need to do more on that. We need to give more support, and we are giving support to all voluntary organisations, community organisations that support victims. So I think we'll do a lot more in terms of victims, but I want to hear from victims. I want victims and people who've learned experience involved in shaping the plan. That's another reason for having the 2-stage approach. In terms of funding, historically, Bedfordshire has been underfunded in as much as successive governments have deemed Bedfordshire to be a rural county. Now, I defy anyone who knows any part of Bedfordshire, actually, but particularly the south of the county, to say this is rural. We're not Lincolnshire. And I don't begrudge Lincolnshire having their fair share of funding, of course. We have, for the last 6 years, had 2 special grants on an annual basis from government. Part, I think, in recognition that the overall funding is wrong, and also in recognition that we have more gun crime and more serious organised crime. So we get something called Bosun and something called Costello, and you'll hear a lot more about Costello at the end of this week, as it's a historic moment of its success in terms of tackling serious crime and getting some very nasty criminals convicted and in prison. My argument with government is threefold. I want to see more funding for police in general, but we know, inherited from the previous government, police is not a protected budget. So, if there's a squeeze, unless Rachel Reeves makes a change in the budget, police is not going to get a great deal of additional money in the short term. Second, I want to see overall increase in police funding. I also want to see a fairer system of funding. I think that will take some time to come, because part of the challenge is for governments, and I can understand this, unless the whole cake is increasing, it's difficult to redistribute it, because you'd be taking money from other places. And, the Metropolitan Police, which is the most resource police force in the world. I was at a meeting where the commissioner was saying, he had a budget deficit and shortfall greater than our total, several times greater than my annual budget. So, I think there's some big challenges there. I also want to see, and I've had direct conversations with the Home Secretary about this, is that those special grants are rolled into the core budget. So we don't have to bid for them annually and they're secured. I think that would make a huge difference. It's nearly 10% of our budget. The other 2 things is, if we work in partnership and we can do prevention, we can actually get better value for money, and we can do things jointly. Why do we have X number of workshops across the county, for example? I just throw that as an example. So I think there are areas where we can collaborate. Second, I want to ensure that we use every pound we spend, whether it's from the 60% that comes from central government or 40% that comes from council taxpayers, in the most effective and efficient way. And I won't accept as an excuse, and nor will the Chief Constable, that because we're underfunded, we shouldn't be doing excellent and we shouldn't be having good delivery. So it's actually about how we use those resources most effectively. But it may also require some honesty to explain sometimes to the public the resources are not there. So actually, that's not going to be a priority. That's not going to happen. Because I think sometimes, and a lot of PCCs are guilty of this, ministers are guilty of this, dare I say, sometimes councils and council leaders even, but not with the honourable exception here, are guilty of this, of actually pretending that with limited resources you can do everything. You can't. And again, I want to have that much greater dialogue. So absolutely more money. But the most important thing is how we use that money to greatest impact.
Thank you. I have 8 names and 10 minutes left, so we will try to get through as many as we can. Jackie, did you have your hand up earlier when the first round of hands went up? No. When I first asked, because it was hard to get everybody, and I'm trying to do it in order. So
sorry, I can't. I don't know the exact time on the clock when I put my hand up. All I know, I've had my hand up. Sorry.
I'm going to, Jackie, I'm just going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to go through, you just put your hands up now. I'm just going to go through the order that I got, and then I'll come to you. Is that okay? So I'll go to Fatima Baker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome, John. Thank you for your presentation. I'm worried about the delays in the criminal justice system, with many cases taking a long time to be heard in court, like the one you mentioned. Can you explain what is being done to reduce this backlog, help speed up the process, and how are you working with other agencies to make sure these delays don't affect public safety and trust in the system? Thank you.
You're absolutely right, Councillor, that there is a backlog. My understanding of the backlog at Luton Crown Court is over 800 cases. One of the questions I was asking the court service today at the meeting was, how does that break down into categories of crime? Because I'm really concerned, as I said earlier, where people have been victims of, say, sexual crimes and similar, that I would want to see those expedited rather than some other forms of crime if we can. But there are lots of blocks in the system. One is sometimes a crime occurs and it can take a long time for the police to get resolution, and we need to get that better. Then there can be the delay of getting the Crown Prosecution Service, if it's most cases, but certainly the more serious cases, to agree to a charge and a prosecution. So that's a further delay. Then you get a delay into the court system. Several things we can do. One is we are, and I hate the term, out of court disposal, it's called, which is sounds awful, doesn't it? But actually, these are measures taken to stop people getting to court, even when they've committed crime. And we're doing some really good work in Bedfordshire, both through the police and in partnership with our partners in local government and other partners. So methods so people, can actually have support, punitive. You still get a criminal record, but you don't have to end up in the criminal justice system waiting for the courts. It also takes the pressure off the courts, and it probably it avoids custodial sentences, because we know if you get a custodial sentence, but the prisons are overcrowded. I was only hearing on the radio as I drove down here the real challenge in male prisons across the country at the moment. But actually, you're more likely to reoffend if you've been in prison. So, particularly if you've had short sentences, I'm really pleased the government are looking at the sentencing policy to eliminate some of the shorter sentences, which actually don't work effectively. So we could do an awful lot on that. But again, it requires us all working together. The police can do their bit, but actually it requires other partners too.
Councillor Stevens, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, John, for the presentation. Interesting to have an exchange after 30 years across the council chamber, I have to say. I'd like to make a plea really on behalf of community policing. Your predecessor had lots of increases in precept. There were promises to do a lot for community policing. It didn't happen. They are under-resourced. They work hard with what they have, but is there something more that we could do for this important area of policing in the town?
I think a lot of the increases in precept were presented as increasing community policing. They were actually filling gaps of the impact of austerity of the previous government's cuts. So I think, I would want to be absolutely clear. If we're increasing the precept, I want to explain what we're doing with that money. If it's to fill the gaps or to, and we've got a deficit. As we start our budget for next year, we start with a deficit. So that'll be a challenge. The point I made earlier, I think community and local policing is important, but it's not just about numbers. We want more numbers. And I certainly will get our fair share, I hope a bit more, of the 13,000 new officers that the government are going to make available over the lifetime of this parliament. And they will be community, they'll be designated. But the other is, and I think all of us can occasionally just forget that wherever you are, there will be a lot of police activity. It's not just community and neighbourhood policing. If you are if you're a woman subject to violence, it will be the specialist teams that work on domestic abuse and violence. If you've been subject to fraud, it will be the fraud team or cyber attacks, which is obviously increasing. We're all protected by the work we're doing on serious crime and counter-terrorism. And we have an airport here, and airport protection is important too. So I think one of the things I want to have is greater transparency of both how police are deployed and also the criteria taken for that decision. Ultimately, that is decisions one for the Chief Constable.
Thank you. Councillor Basit Hussain, just to let you know, John, we have 5 minutes left.
I'll be trying to be short, Madam Mayor, my answer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. John, welcome back to Luton. So I think my question centres around the threat posed by the far right and extremism. And obviously, can I pay tribute to yourself, the Deputy PCC in your office and the police force and the way they dealt with the far right threat during the summer months. I think the way you reassured our communities made a massive difference. I just want to pay tribute to you on that. But obviously, the far right threat hasn't gone away. And I asked you previously in the panel, online radicalisation remains a threat. Our diverse communities in Luton are still concerned. And I was wondering if you could just say some words on what you're doing to reassure our diverse communities that you're still taking it seriously. Thank you.
But first of all, we know that a significant element of counter-terrorism policing is now directed at far-right groups. So that is a threat, and it's a threat nationally, not just in this county. Second, I would pay tribute to the council for what happened in August. I sat in this chamber in a meeting chaired by the leader of the council that had members of the council, officers, members of the faith groups, community leaders and others demonstrate. I think it was the social cohesion group, but correct me if I've got the title wrong, Hazel. That I think was really important. It brought us all together. And I think that's how we tackle this. It's about working in partnership, building that trust and building the intelligence, because thankfully, Bedfordshire was one of the few police services in the whole country that arrested not one person for violent unrest or rioting. And the others were places like the City of London and some of the more very rural parts of the county. So I think that was testimony to what we did, and intelligence too, building that intelligence, because there were no threats ever to Luton. There was a very serious threat in Bedford, and it was there's a lot of misinformation on social media, but actually we had the intelligence through police channels and other channels. And I think it's really important that we get people to listen to official messaging too, because misinformation can do so much damage.
Thank you. Councillor Yaqub Hanif.
Thank you, John, for visiting. And I too can confirm that John is a regular visitor to the town, and you're already an improvement on your predecessor. And for context ahead of my questions, we have lost 23,000 police officers, and that has, impacted on community policing. And like the councillor for Southward said, that the precept has not been utilised. So with that all in mind, Do you have any, and for the record, I don't think we're here to watch a slideshow, so thank you for not inflicting us to death by PowerPoint. So, you know, what are so what we would like to know as the representatives of the entire borough, not just our specific wards in our newsletters, what are your priorities for the whole town? And with that in mind, what do you feel are the biggest challenges of policing the entire town? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And you and I were at an event, very moving but tragic event in Marsh Farm only on Friday, were we not, at the vigil for those the family who had suffered so tragically. And again, that was another example, very good policing, but the support and working with the Borough Council to give support to the community and reassurance was really important. It's another example of that. In terms of what's required, I think what I want to see emerge over the next 6 months or so, and indeed over the next few years in terms of the plan, yes, we'll have a plan for Bedfordshire, but we need to have a plan that's more bespoke to Luton, a plan that may be more bespoke to Bedford, one for central Bedfordshire. We may even want to be even more bespoke because actually they're different, you know, the needs of parts of, and the level of crime and activity in parts of Luton are different. To do that, we have to work with you and listen to you and work with the council. And again, that's why I want to see your community safety partnership plan and the police plan much more aligned. You will know many of the issues, but some of the issues you won't know because actually none of us know in the public domain what may be going on underneath. And we need to be ahead because actually that prevention, it's not just preventing by having better facilities, it's also about having much better intelligence-led policing.
Council, we have reached our 30-minute time limit. There were other people who put their hands up. Please submit your questions in writing. John, would that be?
I'd be very happy, Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think certainly it's reassuring to hear how your plan aligns with our 2040 vision. You're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to leave if you choose to. Thank you so much.
That's an invitation that, and I don't quite know how to answer that last invitation. But thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and to everybody. And please, you've got my contact details. Keep submitting questions and ideas. And I know through the your community safety partnership executive, your chief executive and others will be making sure my feet are to the fire.
Madam Mayor, all members of the council have been circulated with a list of the items before council this evening. 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. Any member affected should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on any question relating to those items. Madam Mayor, I have received no Section 106 disclosures this evening, and I've also received no disclosures of interest.
The next item is a consideration of written questions received under Standing Order 9.1. I call upon Councillor Stevens to ask his question of Councillor Dave Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question to Councillor Dave Taylor is in the following terms. Do residents require planning permission to convert their front gardens into hard standing for their cars? And what steps can be taken to ensure that they include dropped curbs and a pavement crossover as part of the scheme?
Will Councillor Dave Taylor please respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You do not require planning permission to pave over your front garden or on a driveway, with certain exceptions, provided it allows water to drain off naturally. That is the key. However, if the surface to be covered is more than 5 square metres, which is a pretty big front garden, planning permission will be required for laying impermeable hard standing that does not provide water to drain into a permeable area. Most people use their front gardens for car parking. Therefore, consent must be obtained from the Highway Authority to provide a vehicle crossing and a proper drop curb. Volker Highways act as contractors on behalf of Luton Borough Council. It doesn't say whether you can put in your own drop curb or get a contractor to do it on your behalf, but I'm sure if you contact Volker Highways for the consent, I'm sure that they would arrange for the drop curb to be put down, and the cost will be, obviously there'll be a bill for that. It does say you do. And the exceptions are as regards crossovers on a classified road, for example, A505 and A6, would need specific permission, which might not be forthcoming.
Just a supplementary, Madam Mayor, if I could. I understand all those points, Councillor Taylor, but however, if there's no planning that's required, how do we assess that porous type or drainage has been installed, and how do we assess that the pavements are not being broken and the curbs are not being broken, which is causing disruption to our highways across the town?
Yes, Madam Mayor, the last bit first. That's why it needs to be inspected by the Highway Authority to see if any additional work needs to be done on the footpath. And as regards the drop curb, that it actually will outlive its usefulness and be strong enough to do the job. That's why it needs the consent of the local Highway Authority to ensure that everything is safe. But as regards it's the surface runoff, which is the problem nowadays when people do their own concreting over their front garden, block paving over the front garden, and it's the surface runoff that causes the problems with the system. And I think that it's been difficult over the last few years as regards to flood prevention. It certainly hasn't helped when the actual runoff can't permeate into the rest of the garden. Like if you've got a lawn at the front, I mean that provides its own draining. But unfortunately, with the hard standing, you lose that ability.
Just my last short question, Madam Mayor. Can we be assured that the highways carry out inspections on all this work around the town? Because certainly within my ward, I do not see it taking place.
I think that if you've got any specific problems in your ward where there is some damage or somebody has not installed a drop curb properly, then you can easily get in touch with Luton Borough Council Highways. We'll sort it out for you.
The next item is agenda item 6.1. The annual report of the Standards Committee is set out on pages 10 to 28. I call upon the Vice Chair, Councillor Hanif, to deal with this item.
I move the recommendations as set out in paragraph 2 on page 10.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded? Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is the report of the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority as set out on pages 29 to 31. I call upon Councillor Jackie Burnett to present the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report that you have on page 29 is dated July this year, and I would say it's rather out of date. So there's some things that we've had a lot happen in our county that affects Luton that I need to bring you up to date on. So as stated by the Police and Crime Commissioner, in August there was the race riots or planned race riots, of which Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue was a key partner in working with the police in order to make sure that the community, including Luton, was kept safe. And funnily enough, we did welcome the Police and Crime Commissioner over to HQ in Kempston on the day that it was planned for things to happen in Bedfordshire. So we are moving forward with regards to collaboration. So that was in August. There's also been we welcome Bedfordshire, the first Women in Fire Service event in Kempston this month. So this is for the Eastern region that took place. And I felt it was important, with all the stuff that we've seen in the news about misogyny and racism and that within the fire service, there's been a lot going on in Wales, London, Avon and some in West Midlands. In Bedfordshire, we have led the way in welcoming and doing a day to get firefighters, female, across the service, including control, to come to Kempston. And it was a really good day. And I thought it was important to let you know that we are leading the way when it comes to that sort of work. Then we know that there is also the flooding. The word flooding we've had, some people have used the word biblical, the worst in 400 years. So, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. I did hear that, yeah. So I just want to read out what my chief has prepared with regards to that. Heavy rainfall started on the 22nd of September, resulted in significant flooding across much of Bedfordshire, leading to road closures, power outage, school disruptions and damage to properties. Leighton Buzzard, Dunstable and part of central Bedford were particularly affected, with rainfall exceeding 4 times the monthly average. The Environment Agency issued flood warnings and an amber alert was in place until the 24th of September. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue played a pivotal role in the multi-agency response, coordinated by Bedfordshire Local Resilience Forum with both police and fire officers, chairing both the tactical and strategical coordinated group meetings. The service was heavily involved. On the first Sunday, Fire Control responded to the highest number of calls in a single day for almost 2 decades. 356 incidents registered in 8 hours, 1 every 7 seconds. And I was informed by the FBU that some of the control staff received verbal abuse on the phone from residents, because rescuing with a flooding is not a statutory provision. So I need everybody to bear that in mind. I have raised it with our local MP. As we're having more floods, we need to be appropriately resourced, because there's going to be more floodings moving forward. The fire crews were involved rescuing individuals from submerged vehicles, flooded homes. In addition to flooding calls, we dealt with roof fire, animal rescue, multiple RTC, that's road traffic collisions, several homes struck by lightning, a house fire and numerous medical emergencies, including a pregnant woman in distress. The fire crew worked tirelessly along with local authorities and volunteers to ensure public safety, particularly focusing on high-risk areas and vulnerable residents. The fire service dealt with the consequences of extensive road flooding, notably the A421 at Marston Moreton. It just opened last week, that did. So there was key routes that was affected, several key routes in Luton and Dunstable. Firefighters assisted in clearing blocked roads and coordinated with local councils to restore access as soon as possible. Their efforts included helping to mitigate the impact on transport and ensuring safe routes for both emergency vehicles and residents. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue worked closely with local authorities and volunteers to provide essential services to vulnerable communities. The fire crew carried out welfare checks on affected residents. Some people don't know that the fire crews do that, and I think it's really important that my colleagues are aware of that, particularly the elderly and those living alone. This response included distributing flood protection equipment and supporting temporary evacuation centres. The fire service played a critical role in public safety messaging, urging residents to avoid flood areas, refrain from driving through flood waters, and follow emergency guidelines. These actions help to prevent further incidents and minimise risk across the county. resource strain. The extended nature of the flooding posed challenges in resource allocations. Fire control staff and fire crew worked extended hours and additional personnel were mobilised to cover multiple incidents across the region because we provide support to our neighbouring counties. So if you didn't know that, we do, and vice versa. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue also coordinated with national services to ensure sufficient resources for ongoing operation. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue worked with Bedfordshire Local Emergency Voluntary Executive Committee and local flood groups, which provided invaluable on-the-ground support. Volunteers assisted in the distribution of emergency resources, flood monitoring and providing aid to those affected. In conclusion, the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue has demonstrated a robust coordinated response to the September flooding, showcasing resilience and dedication in mitigating the impact on the county. Moving forward, the focus will remain on continued public safety, infrastructure recovery and community support. In addition to that, the principal officers also issued the report on the car park fire. So yes, the car park, that's a bit of work as well. The small little team are doing, and the chief has been in communication with our chief in regards to making that more resilient, but also we have written to ministers to ensure that there is sprinklers, mandatory is what we're laboring for, the National Fire Council, Chief Fire Council, in car parks, schools and care homes. So I thought it was appropriate because there's a lot that's happened since the July report. I'm happy to take any questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Is the motion seconded? Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's not so much a question, but actually a congratulations to the report. Very thorough, thank you very much. And I think it's very easy for us at home, when we've got things like that terrible rain deluge, to sit there going, why is the road closed, etc. So thank you very much. It's very important that we knew just how much work they were doing.
We have Councillor Javaria Hussain.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Well, all I can say is our Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue are unsung heroes, and they do quite a lot, so thank you very much for that insightful update, and I hope that continues when you bring future reports. But they are our unsung heroes, so I want to pay tribute to the incredible work that they do, because we usually forget about them, and thank you for outlining and clarifying their role and what they can and they can't do. So thank you for that.
You can always say thanks by giving to the firefighters charity. I thought I'd just add that in. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, does the council receive the report? Excellent. If any With regard to agenda item 8, there are no written questions this evening for the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority. Jackie, thank you for the report, by the way. Thank you. And the next item is agenda item 9.1, a recommendation from the Executive on the Youth Justice Plan 2024 to 25, as set out on pages 32 to 62.
So, Madam Mayor, it is I who will be moving that.
Sorry?
It will be me who will be moving that instead of Councillor Imiali.
Right, yeah. Okay, all right. So the next item, as I was saying, is agenda item 9.1, a recommendation from the Executive on the Youth Justice Plan 2024 to 25, as set out on pages 32 to 62. Would Councillor Javaria Hussain please move the recommendation?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So basically, this is the Youth Council Justice Plan for 2024 to 2025. By way of background, as brief as I can, local authorities have a statutory duty to submit an annual youth justice plan relating to the provision of youth justice services, with Section 40 of the Criminal Crime and Disorder Act 1998 setting out the Youth Justice Partnership's responsibilities in producing a plan. This is obviously done after consulting with partner agencies. Whilst this is an annual plan and it's a statutory duty, it is important to understand that as a service, this is the youth service, We do not just deliver youth services, we also coordinate and contextualise safeguarding response to criminal exploitation and targeted early intervention. Now, the critical issue that we do need to understand is how children in Luton are drawn into criminal exploitation in the first place. And it's great to see that the report also does focus on Luton Council's 2040 visions about tackling inequalities and homelessness and also poverty as well, which are obviously underlying causes that need to be considered, as well as social, economic issues and education needs. The key challenge remains is basically formulating an overall strategy that means the incidents of violence do not happen in the first place, so we are able to focus on proactively building on successes rather than having to constantly manage and reflect retrospectively. So the report does actually draw on that. So with that in mind, I'd like to move recommendations set out in paragraph 2 on page 32.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Are there any questions? Councillor Aslam Khan.
I agree in principle what the youth justice system is trying to do, have a collaborative approach to make sure that we do everything possible to give the very best start to our young people, keep them safe and ensure there's opportunities for them. However, I see a gap within our approach in education and the justice system. One being that the focus is all about education but not character building. When you're walking on the street, you see very loud, very rude young men and women walking, no respect for the elders, no respect for traffic law, no respect for the law. How are we, and this is not just for you, but it's for us all, to see how we're going to change our future generations who are going to have those values that once existed in this community. Is our education system ready enough? Is it prepared enough to make sure that we change the course of where some of our youth and young people are going? The other thing is about aspiration. And, I feel that we need to do a lot more around aspiration and opportunity as something that maybe you might have already thought about and which I know is in plans. But I think character building is fundamental and should come first before anything else.
Respond to that?
Do respond, Councillor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Khan, for your comments plus the questions as well. Suffice to say, firstly, we are in the process of refreshing our education strategy, which works closely with schools, but also it's just not, I personally would say it's not a responsibility just of education institutions. It's about us as community leaders, about how we can be better role models and support our young people. But like I said, that is something that we are, as part of character building, that is something that will be set in our education refresh. And on your second point, yeah, aspiration is important, which is why, as well as refreshing the education strategy, we are also refreshing the skills and employment strategy, because those are absolutely important. Because a lot of our young people, as we all know, they inspire and they want the best starts in life, and we need to ensure that we do work towards that in helping and supporting that, and that's something we're looking at. But what I can do, given that it is a good question, we can give you a detailed response in writing if you prefer that, in the interest of time.
Thank you. Councillor Yaqub Hanif.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's fair to say that the last 14 years has been a gradual attack on the aspirations and opportunity of many of this country's young people. So I think it takes quite a bit of nerve for you to make that kind of statement. Character building, I think the last thing we need is a nanny state. So as somebody who works in schools...
could we focus on the question, please?
Thank you. Sorry, Madam Mayor. So in terms of moving away from, heading towards a nanny state, so who from the schools do you intend to work with, and how do you plan on making schools an integral part of your plans, so that we can have more collaborative working, and not replacing the greater responsibilities that we all have as a society to bring up young people.
So if I can respond, Madam Mayor. So with regards to that, thank you for the question and your comment, no comment. With regards to your question, all I can say is that with regards to our refresh strategy, we are going to be working much more collaboratively than we already do with schools, so that it's really important not only for young people to finish education, but obviously to support them in their future prospects, so that be it with further education or getting an apprenticeship and getting that start and the skills necessary to get a job at the end of the day. So we will be looking at that, and hopefully, as somebody who is in education within an education establishment, we will be looking to you, of course, as well as others, schools and educational establishments for that support and that collaborative approach, the work that we are already doing anyway.
Mahmood Hussain, Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just say that I think, would you would agree with me that it is also a parental responsibility and society responsibility, and many of us had this responsibility many times before, many years. So we need to take into account what did we do as an individual when we had the responsibility, and how much have we contributed, and then we start challenging the future generations, because it is our behavior too that is also important, and parental one is the number one. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Javeria Hussain, a quick response.
Response to that. Thank you very much, Councillor Hussain. Absolutely very valid comment there, that obviously parental responsibility is important, but nevertheless, I would also say that, sometimes parents do need that additional support, which is why partner institutions plus education establishments and obviously the council will work closely with those parents. But you're absolutely right. It's important about being role models, and that starts from home. Thank you.
Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor. I had moved on. Should we allow it? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What we're seeing a lot of in our ward is the opening of within our ward is the opening of antisocial homes. A lot of other councils, definitely Central London councils, are sending a lot of antisocial children to our ward, including ex-gang members. What has the council got in place to deal with such children?
Okay, I think that is a good question, but I didn't quite exactly hear that. And obviously, I don't know the details of your ward. But what might be really useful, as it is a good question, if you can send me an email, then I can give you a written response. Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you, Councillor Stuart Miller. Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is agenda item 9.2, a recommendation from the executive arising from its meeting held on 7th of October 2024, seeking council's approval to a revision to the budget framework to fund the temporary accommodation purchase scheme 4. Would Councillor Roach please move the recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Full council are required by legislation to consider and approve strategies for both treasury management and investment every year. The report covers required change to 24-25, the strategy to address the pressing issue of temporary accommodation, which means the council's prudential indicators require amendment. Prudential indicators are fundamental components of the council's financial health and are important every year, given the key objective in the corporate plan to be a financially sound and efficient council. The council is now looking to borrow an additional 20 million in respect to the financing of the temporary accommodation purchasing scheme, TAP 4, as funding for the scheme is not currently provided for in the council's current budget framework. The manoeuvre requires an adjustment to the capital programme for 24-25, an increase to the capital financing requirement of 20 million. The increase means that in order to maintain proper control over borrowing, the prudential indicators for liability, benchmarking, operational boundary and authorised limit all need to be increased by the 20 million accordingly. This project will generate cost savings from the use of the council's own buildings to be purchased within the TAP 4 budget instead of the currently used high-cost external provision, example, the use of nightly paid hotels and bed and breakfast establishments. there will be no impact on the Council's revenue budget. The Council will be able to operate and finance the capital programme within these adjusted indicators, which will be reviewed within the 25-26 budget setting framework. Council will receive an updated Treasury Management Strategy along with the mid-term financial planning update in February 2025. Council is recommended to approve the adjustment to the borrowing strategy of 24-25 to account for the additional tapped potential borrowing and the adjustment to the Council's potential and Treasury indicators, the adjustment to the capital financing requirement and borrowing estimates, and to note no impact on the Council's revenue budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Is the motion seconded? Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Aslam Khan.
Madam Mayor, I welcome this proposal for buying homes locally for those people who are in temporary accommodation. We, in the scrutiny, did not support the proposal from the Labour group of taking the residents away further afield and tearing families apart. So therefore, I welcome this because you can get homes, decent homes here locally and keep the families together. However, as you know, Luton has the worst housing crisis in the country. Yet, the Labour government has reduced the housing targets.
Khan, could we come to the question,
coming.
Please?
Yeah, my question. Yet, the Labour government has reduced the targets for housing in Luton. How will you address the long-term problem that we have of housing here in Luton? This is only a short measure. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Aslam Khan, I believe that was not actually a question on the proposal in front of Council today. Would you agree? Yep, so we're not going to answer that question. So we will move on. Are there any other questions? Okay. Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Tom Shaw.
I am really surprised at Aslam. We're putting 20 million in the budget, borrowing which won't affect the council at all, because there'll be savings by not having people in bed and breakfast, not having people in temporary accommodation. One of the things that I think needs to be looked at very, very closely by standards is Councillor Aslam is an owner of HMOs and some temporary accommodation in this town. Whether he should be speaking on it or not is a question for the monitoring officer. But
I object, Madam Mayor, that is personal. I always have recorded, and the councillor knows, everything I do is recorded here, and that is below the belt. This is personal. Everyone knows that I'm a landlord, and I asked a question on housing, and this is not right, Tom.
Councillor Aslam Khan will take that down as a point of order. Councillor Tom Shaw.
Yeah, I'm quite at liberty to ask the monitoring officer to have a look at it and make sure it's all right. Quite at liberty to do that. But isn't it strange that the Tory party are the ones who objected to this, not to this 20 million, but to trying to place people outside Luton at costs we can afford, when they blatantly refuse to lift the LHA in Luton so we can afford to pay those landlords the rents they want in Luton, which is a rip-off anyway. But Councillor Khan has not said a word about that. Not a single word. Now, if the Tory government had wanted at any time, with all the opportunities it had,
Tom,
to lift it...
You're not actually addressing
Yes, I am.
The report in front of us.
Yes, I am. The £20 million is all about LHA and why we can't afford to have people in Luton. You let Councillor Khan say it. You let him say it about moving people out of Luton, so we've got two rules, have we?
Can we stick to the report in front of us?
Yeah, we'll stick to the report. So, if the LHA could be lifted, we wouldn't need to borrow this £20 million. And the reason that LHA wouldn't be lifted is the Tories didn't want it done, and you had 14 years of Tory government stopping it being lifted. That would have meant we wouldn't have had to borrow this money. So I find it rather strange that a Tory can get on his feet and condemn something that his government has forced on us.
Thank you. The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is item agenda 9.2, a recommendation from the Executive arising from its meeting held... sorry. Okay. Wait. Okay. My apologies. The next item is a report in the public interest regarding the audit of the Council's 2018 to 19 accounts as set out on pages 63 to 101. Before proceeding with this item, please note that I shall be using my discretion under Standing Order 17.3 to permit a member to ask more than one question on this item. I propose to use the same arrangement as for the Council budget motion and will be inviting the first member of each of the Liberal Democrats, Conservative and Labour groups who indicate that they wish to ask a question, to ask an unlimited number of questions and supplementaries to the mover of the motion within a total time of 20 minutes each. The normal rules will then apply to all other members. I call upon Councillor Burnett to move the recommendation.
Thanks. I move the recommendation set out at paragraph 2.1 to 2.3 on page 63.
Is the motion seconded? Are there any questions? Councillor Franks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we should start with the decision not to accept Ernst & Young's recommendation 1. And the question is, I wonder what councillor can tell me that will enable me to share her confidence that the council's management of risk does not require improvement.
Councillor Burnett.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Frank. So if I got this clear, you want us to not go with to consider the public recommendation 1. Is that what you're saying? Let's just make sure I've got that right. Which part did you not want us to accept?
Would you like me to repeat the question? But
Yes,
if I hope that's not going to count against my 20 minutes, Madam Mayor. The question relates to the suggestion that recommendation 1 should not be accepted. Recommendation 1 was concerned with improving the council's management of risk.
Okay.
If you're not accepting the recommendation, will you please tell me what I need to know to assure me that the council's management of risk does not require improvement?
Right. With regards to the management of risk, with regards to the point raised in the report about management of risk register comes to every audit and governance committee, of which the Liberal Democrats have members that attend. We've got Councillor Skeppelholm and Underwood, who are regular attendants with regards to the risk registers and arch risk. They've always contributed if they've got any concerns, and I am not aware. The risk register, the question is to which point of the risk register? The risk register and EY's report spans 4 years. So let's just put this into context. Their public interest report relates to 1889. We are now in the financial year 2024-25. And as you will have seen in the response in the report, EY's response and the officers' response, a lot of the stuff that they have raised have been addressed. They have been addressed. It's not that they haven't been addressed, they have been addressed. So I need to set that out now. The public interest reports relate to a time in 1819. We are now nearly 5 years later. All the stuff that EY have raised, they have been addressed. I'll just say that straight from the beginning. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm more than happy to go further. But you have got individuals from your group that are regular attendants to the Audit and Governance Committee, and they are thorough, I have to say. So if they had any concerns, I'm sure they would have raised it in the meetings over the last 3 years, and we would have had the appropriate public debate, as everything's in the public, to discuss things. So that's my response. I'm more than happy to take another question if you require.
In 20 minutes, Madam Mayor, I don't have time to go into the details that the councillor is referring to, so I'm just going to have to take her word for it. But let's move on. She did mention the fact that Audit and Governance Committee have been receiving reports. I wonder if she could comment on the fact that this very, very serious issue hasn't been reported to Audit and Governance Committee since the middle of March. That's almost 7 months. Doesn't she think that Audit and Governance Committee, of which I believe she's the chair, perhaps ought to have been kept up to date and consulted more frequently?
Okay. With the public interest report, everything that EY was saying that they were going to do, they have been brought up to speed. Everything that there's not, actually, I would say I've shared quite thoroughly with regards to all the reports and conversations that has taken place. There's nothing that I have not shared. And when I've had conversations, because it's not just Luton that is behind on audit, the whole sector is behind on audit. I have been attending the Eastern Region Committee for Audit and Governance, and there is a local authority, I've been told, I think it was by the National Audit Office, that have unsigned accounts going back to 2014. So the troubles and the situation where we're in is not unique to Luton. It is a question of the complexity of the accounts and not enough staff, qualified staff within the audit profession and within highly technical accountants within the public sector. So that's local authorities, NHS. We had EY at one meet, if I remember correctly, and I've got officers here, and we can always go back because all the recordings are on YouTube now, where they're not just dealing with us, they've been dealing with the NHS. So they said early on in their meetings, and it's recorded in the paperwork, where they were going to go. It's not out of the blue, Councillor Flanks. It is somewhere where they have said where they may go, and they've just taken rather long to get there because officers have, between meetings, everything EY asked for, they gave. They went back one time. I think there's even in the papers about officers went back, I think it was 16 years or something like that, to find information to give to EY. So audit and governance, this is not something that came out of the blue. I would say that we were quite exasperated because there was a time last year I called an extraordinary meeting thinking we had just about got to the finish line because they said, oh, if you get this info. And then we had the meeting in October 2023 and 18-19 wasn't done. There was also, if you look back on YouTube, the discussions going backwards and forward, Ernst & Young's made in public they had stopped working on the accounts. They made that in public. Everybody can go back. Please feel free and go back on YouTube and said they weren't going to, because they didn't feel the situation was going to change. So I disagree that I have, as chair, not been transparent to what's going on, and all the training I've gone on and the attendance to the Eastern Region sessions, I have shared the presentation with my colleagues on audit and governance. I make sure about that.
Thank you for that. Not sure that it fully answers the question, but there you go. It's interesting that recommendation 1 also refers to stabilising the council's financial position. The response is suggested that we have positively addressed and stabilised the financial position. Is that why there is a pretty permanent £8 million deficit in the medium-term financial plan, and why there are an accumulated somewhat like £7 million worth of savings that haven't been achieved in the last 2 years?
Right, Councillor Frank, we're talking about public interest report that relates to the financial year 18-19. You're asking about a situation in accounts that right now we've got Grant Thornton looking at our financial positions, because that came to audit and governance for the year 2023-2024. We're working on these things. So everybody needs to think about what was going on in the financial year, yeah, what is relating. It's 18, 20, 19. And I think that's where the complexity or the challenge of where EY's heading and maybe where you're... When those papers come, the years that you're relating to currently, on finance review, you have the opportunity to ask the question. The accounts do come. Have I missed something? Do they not come to finance review, the accounts, and they come to audit and governance? Because one of the things in moving forward and the learning, and we had a review by the Good Governance Institute, is that audit and governance need to strategically coordinate our work plan moving forward. That is something from the Good Governance, and that was published, it's been shared. Everybody can go and look on Luton Borough Council's website to see what the Good Governance Review did this year with regards to what, and there's representation from across the council. So I can't answer your question because I'm talking about this report. I'm not talking about those financial years. I'm talking about this report right now, Councillor Frank.
Bearing in mind that the council's financial position has hardly improved since the 18-19 year, I actually view the kind of answers I'm getting as evasive rather than answering the questions. Let's move on. Where do we go next? The report refers to a CIPFA report, which, as I recall, also had some fairly critical comments to make about the council's financial management. Is that CIPFA report publicly available, and would the chair please tell me where we can find it?
Officers, is it? I thought it was publicly. Chief?
So just to clarify, the report is publicly available. It did come to scrutiny, and there were some recommendations, but largely the report was positive about how Luton Council managed its finances.
I think it's really important, Councillor Frank, that we need to bear in mind the times we have gone through. We are not the only local authority that's dealing with challenges. We are not. So everybody that's on YouTube needs to bear that in mind. We are not the only local authority dealing with financial challenges and squeeze. We just passed an agreement to increase because of temporary accommodation. So I think it's disingenuous of you to not bear that. We've balanced the books every year, and everything comes to finance review.
Yet more evasion, Madam Mayor. Let's just keep moving forward, shall we? I wonder whether the councillor could advise us what improvements have been made as a result of the engagement of Deloitte.
Officers, did you get that?
So, Madam Mayor, just to clarify, we engaged Deloitte to do a detailed piece of technical work on the accounts. That work was largely successful. We moved forward with the accounts. As Council is aware, there were some very, very technical elements that impacted the 18-19 accounts and subsequent accounts because of the impact of COVID. And the utilisation of external organisations like Deloitte, and there have been other external advisors as well, was used to ensure that we dealt with those detailed technical points. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for the clarity. Councillor Franks, you have about 5 minutes left now.
Yeah, I think that should be more than enough, bearing in mind the kind of answers we're getting. There's not a lot of point in going much further, is there? There is one area I think might be able to get some daylight. The Council's complaint to the Public Sector Audit Appointments Panel received a pretty swift brush-off. I wonder if the Councillor could tell us what she's hoping for from the new complaint to the Institute of Chartered Accountants.
Before I answer your question, Councillor Frank, I think it's quite disingenuous, and one might say, should I use the word rude? Because I am spending the time to give you a response. The mere fact you don't like the response I'm giving you is not, I'm being courteous and I'm being respectful, as I'm meant to be, and you have members from your party sitting on audit and governance. Everything goes to them. So the mere fact I'm not answering it how you want it to be answered doesn't mean that I'm not answering your question, and I need to state that for the record. So with regards to the PSAA, what I wanted, well, the officers are still pursuing with regards to the reductions of fees, because it's really, really a lot, and it really does grind me that we have spent exorbitant amount of money on auditors' time, officers going back how many years over final accounts to get information for them, and we're going to pay for something and we haven't got an finished product. With regards to the Institute of Chartered Accountants for England and Wales, officers wanted to pursue that, to be honest, and it's about their reputation and their professionalism. And I'm stating it straight, because you know is, I do answer things straight. Some people don't like my straight answers, but I do answer things straight. I didn't think it was going to, because I've done these sort of things as a school governor, where we didn't like the answer. We thought they were disingenuous. We spend loads of money challenging it, and it doesn't change diddly squat. But I respect what the officers have had to do. The Chief Exec and the Section 151 officers, they have spent enormous amount of time to safeguard the finance. If you remember, we called an extraordinary budget meeting in pandemic. Yeah? And the pandemic affected everybody. It didn't just affect Luton, it affected everybody, and we're still feeling the ramification. So I respect the officers and I support their desire to stand professionally and not be. But I wouldn't have done that. I would have moved on, because we got Grant Thornton. It's about the new relationship reform. What do we learn from the experience that we've had with Ernst & Young? That's what I've asked our officers learn, because nobody is perfect, but we must learn from what's happened. So that's my answer, my direct answer to you. Yeah? Okay. Next.
I think I'll probably run out of time.
Just one moment. A point of order, was that Yakub?
Yeah, point of order, Madam Mayor. Isn't the Councillor Frank's time up? I thought it was 20 minutes.
Not yet, not yet.
The first time I heard about this dispute between the council and the auditors, it was all about the valuation of the airport asset and the capitalisation of expenditure on the DCO application and the Century Park Access Road expenditure. That all seems to have disappeared. It's hardly mentioned at all in the paperwork we've been given regarding the public interest report. Why is that?
I think you need to take it up with EY. I can't speak for EY. They are more than able, I'm sure, to speak for themselves. So you need to ask them why they've done that. I'm not going to second guess them.
Are there any more? No. Excellent. Thank you. Indeed. Let's move on. Are there any questions from the Conservatives? No? Okay. From the Labour group? Yes, please. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, I think there's some straight questions to ask, just so that we can get some clarification on, to be honest with you, why this is a statement of accounts from 2018-19. Why did it take so long to issue the public information report, and why are they actually doing it now?
EY mentioned that we're considering a public interest report at the Audit and Governance Committee meeting in 2022, raising similar concerns to those in the issued PIR. At that meeting, the Director of Finance, Revenue and Benefits provided members with the response to the concern outlined in the report by EY. We cannot answer on behalf of EY, like I said, why they took so long to issue the public interest report. We raised issuing the public interest report with EY and expressed our concerns in writing as to why we believe that issuing a public interest report now was not appropriate, as these issues have already been raised, discussed in public meetings and resolved long ago. It's been like Groundhog Day, again and again. Specifically, since September 2022, the impact of COVID-19 and the reduction in air passengers numbers on whether the council is a going concern has receded. And I believe everybody knows that you can feel the car park, up there at the airport is way busy. The young people are booked their holiday and they're gone in Luton. And the finance team capacity and capability and the governance arrangements have improved. At last week's Audit and Governance, in response to some of the stuff that EY was saying, the chief actually gave the stats on the level of turnover within the team. And the finance team turnover is lower than the council. So I think that is really important that we know that. There has been challenges on staff, but they've never given up. In terms of securing the efficient, effective and economic use of resources, there is evidence from EY on value for money audit conclusion for 2021-22 and 22-23 that the procurement and contract management issue is not regarded as a risk to this. In other words, the matter of the public interest have indeed been largely resolved. Because that's one of the things they mentioned about procurement. And officers are now concerned with, well, if it's been resolved, why are you doing this? And they accept, and it's all on the internet. You can see their value for money statement report. Yeah, the amount of things that had crosses is reduced. That is one that is gone. So I hope that answers your question.
You said the procurement issue has been resolved. Actually, when was that issue resolved?
Right, EY interim value for money arrangement presented to Audit and Governance on the 9th acknowledged that there was no weakness in contract management and procurement arrangement in the years 2021, 22, 22, 23. The issue was actually resolved in 2021, and we're in, 2024.
Mentioned that the capability and capacity in the finance team has been improved over the last 4 years. Could you elaborate a little bit more so that members can get reassurance on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to give more detail, but I have to say, and I said at Audit and Governance, the COVID-19 was a crystallisation moment for finance. with many professions, but for finance it was. And for somebody that done finance for 20 years, it was always seen as a non-important role. It was always frontline was more important than the finance staff. But we weren't training people. This country was not investing in vocational skills like finance. So in response to my colleague's question, we do not have a high turnover of staff in finance compared to the rest of the council, other authorities or the private sector. I've been told, and people say, yes, I'm going to come, I'm accepting the contract, boof, boof, no, I'm off, I'm not coming, I found better. Yeah, a generation we have raised in this country, going about youth. It's we, the society, that raised them. It takes a village to raise a child. So their expectation is me, myself, and I. If I can find better, I'm off. So we've done well in this town. In this council, officers have not given up in getting staff, highly skilled staff, and we've done that. Many organisations experience difficulties in recruiting. Key technical staff posts are now filled. And the Section 151 officer at last week's meeting gave a breakdown of all the roles that have been filled. And I think they gave people's name as well. You know, that reassurance that we've got these people in, these highly skilled. When they started, they gave that reassurance when they started. So it's been really, really hard. Representation were made to EY, as this was explained by the chief. I've said that. And for instance, example, the current churn rate for finance staff is 8.9%, with a churn rate for last year of 6%, indicating a stable team. You know, those of us who like the numbers, are just giving you the numbers. This compares to local government sector of 14%. So all my colleagues that are working like adult social care, children's services, getting staff. So we understand the challenge for our sector. Our current vacancy rate is 9 posts, 10%, with 5 of the posts covered by agency staff. Since that evidence was provided, the position has improved. However, for some reason not explained to us, EY did not give due consideration to the evidence provided or consider this issue in the broader context of national shortage or experienced finance staff on issues that they themselves face. So let me just say that again. They them face that. They had audit staff that left, and they had to recruit to get audit staff to work to do our audit. So they weren't a bubble unto themselves. We're all in this together. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons. Are there any amendments? Any further questions? Mahmoud Hussain, Councillor Mahmoud Hussain. And
would Councillor Burnett agree with me that the very straightforward question I asked on the Audit and Governance Committee is that has all the information been given to you? And the answer was yes. Yep. And the further one I said to them, and the members will recall those that were in the Audit and Governance Committee, I'm very disappointed to see all these professionals arguing in public, disagreeing over 4 years, never ever bringing to the attention of the members of Audit and Governance Committee. There was no response from Ernst & Young.
You did ask that question.
And final one, I think, when members were given the impression on the day that the officers were not being straight, then the Section 151 officer, as well as the chief executive, made a statement to say, and it's in the minutes, that we have given you all the information that you wanted. And the response was not, I think, Ernst & Young were economical with the truth. Thank you.
If I can just respond back. In the meeting last week, I asked Ernst & Young, in their report, they state about materiality and risk assessment for last week, and they defined what materiality is and the percentage. They defined it. And I asked them, does all this exceed their materiality as defined in their report? And the answer was no. Okay, so we're clear. You can go back and look at YouTube. I did ask that question. So for me, if it didn't meet their own definition of materiality, I am quite perplexed why we are here. Okay, so for clarity. Thank you, Councillor.
So, Councillor Wynne.
I found some of the answers quite frustrating, so let me go to a very specific question. The report that is in front of us, as I read it, is extremely combative. I believe that it shows a level of attitude from this council towards Ernst & Young that has been hostile rather than cooperative. Can I ask, please, when we're going to stop picking fights with Ernst & Young that have so far cost this council hundreds of thousands of pounds?
That is an interesting question, Councillor. For the time that I've been on audit and governance, I do not see us picking a fight. The question I ask is, and I've been reflecting on this for the last 2 years, if members of audit and governance can ask scrutinising questions of our officers, can we not ask the same of Ernst & Young, of any external auditors? Or is it a power situation that whatever the external auditors say, even if you don't agree, you're not able to have, as professionals, to challenge that? Because that question you're asking me is as if we are in disagreement and we can provide the evidence factually, should that not be considered? I'm a very factual person. I might be emotional, but my brain, my first love is numbers. Is it yes, no, yes, no, numbers? Everything in life is about numbers. As you know, and we all know in politics, it's all the numbers. So if our officers have provided the information and that's been totally kicked to the curb, are they or we not in our right to say, why did you not consider that? Please explain. Because if you're talking to a child and they ask the question, why? And the child, and you give them, and they don't, and they'll say, why? And they keep asking why. Because you don't, that's all we are asking Ernst & Young. Why have you, they're not answering. They're not giving an answer. And I think it's only fair, as we're letting off taxpayers' money at the end of the day, that if we can't understand the rationale why they're coming to something or why they've done something, we should be able to ask why. Now, there are some of us that was growing up in the time when you didn't ask questions of people because they knew better. Some of us might remember that, yeah? You don't ask because we know. You should just listen and do as you're told. Is that where we are? Because they're professionals, our officers are professionals, and EY are professionals. So that's my answer. It may not be what you want to hear, but that's how I've seen it and reflected on it. Thank you.
Councillor Fry.
I think I have a right to come back with a response at this point, don't I? It's a supplementary question that I have. I would actually like an answer to my question. I don't wish to be lectured to. I want an answer to my question. The report is combative. If we weren't combative, would we get more response and more reactions in a grown-up manner with our previous auditor.
Councillor Wynne, with all due respect, that was not a supplementary question, so we'll move on to Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a question on recommendation 5. I'd like some clarity on the point, please. It states that the council secured a firm of strategic advisors, and it didn't say who they were or what the strategic.
Sorry, Councillor, can I stop you? Can you go? I didn't hear what you're saying with the bell going and people sitting down. So can you take me to the page where you're answering your question?
Yes, recommendation 5, page 68.3.
Page 50?
68.
68, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It said that the council had secured a firm of strategic advisors, but there were no names there. Could you tell me something about that, please, what the quality review was that was put in place and when they were engaged?
Sorry, I didn't hear you clearly. So you're saying we have consistent...
It was when they were engaged and what was put in place and who they were.
I'm on page 68. Sorry, I'm not... Right. Okay, I'm with it. So apologies. Chief, can you say when they were appointed? Are you able to? I know they were appointed in the last year, were they not?
Yeah, I apologise, Councillor. The name of the company, and it is a very, very highly technical company, highly competent. The name of the company is just not in my head. I'll provide a written response by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Move on to Councillor James Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a very technical and complex report with a lot of difficult language, I think, for the layman to understand. So I appreciate the Chair's penchant for straight talking, so I'll ask a couple of straight questions. Can the Chair tell me if the Ernst & Young report identifies any current outstanding issues with the Council's finance function, and if any other external organisations have examined Luton Council's finance function since 2018-19, and if so, what have they found? Thank you.
Yes, right, so when we done the budget, the emergency budget, the commissioners that came in, they did look at the finance function, and they considered that report, if I remember correctly, was presented to everybody. It wasn't in secret. It wasn't just to the exec. That reassurance and any recommendations on improvement is well known and documented. And one of the things that is actually in the value for money statement is about we were one of the few councils that were proactive in doing the emergency budget. Yeah, so we didn't wait like others. We did, and that was recognised. We were the first. Okay, we were the first. So there's them. We've also had peer review. They've come in. So there's recommendation from there. But there was nothing on weakness with the finance. It's the same challenge with everybody, yeah. But that's good. We're grappling. They recognise the challenges of finances, but there was nothing that came from that is significant. And also, we've had good governance review that came in. What we're doing is good. What they said that we've got to do now as an audit and governance committee is think more strategically, so foresight and thinking ahead. And I recognise that we've already started to do one recommendation. So with regards to the issues of the complexity of local authority finance in trading and shareholders, that was something the council set up the shareholders group. So that's something that's happened since COVID. And as a result of the good governance review, paper went to audit and governance last week of audit and governance. The chair of audit and governance and it was passed to sit on the Luton shareholders group as an advisor to look at governance and risk. and will provide a report back to Audit and Governance. Now, that went through, that paper is on our website, and the members of the public and colleagues can go and see that. Because as we live in more challenging time, we have to deal with more complex risk and ask questions on that. And the complexity of our finance is no different to a lot of other local authorities. With austerity, we've had to change our risk profile and become more entrepreneur. So I understand everybody's nervousness, but that is a review that's come back, and we've started to implement the recommendation from the Good Governance Review. And everybody can have a look and look on that and ask questions if required.
Thank you,
I hope
Councillor
I've answered
Roach.
your question.
Thank you, Jack. Councillor Roach.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I've just got a few things to say, really. As the members of... Thank you, Chair, for the questions tonight. As the members of Audit and Governance and Financial Scrutiny Review know that I sit at every meeting, and not once I've heard a combative effect going on. It's been calm, it's been measured, good challenged by your colleagues here and by my colleagues. Not once has it been an area where there's a battle. It's been good challenge and good scrutiny. Yes, I've got my question, yes, but we've got to come back to that because that's wrong. I've sat on all these committees, and not once has your colleagues and yourself shown any, I won't say shown any concern, because we've got concern, but you've always shown, though you're supporting the council on this, you've always shown that, okay? Yourself, you're able to bring it back to full council any time you liked, but you chose not to. So, you know, we obviously thought we were getting support from you. And there is a question, Madam Mayor, please leave it with me. Oh, there is. So the question is really, I mean, David, you sat in with meetings with us. We invited you in. We invited you into meetings with ourselves, myself, the leader, Section 151 officer, Jackie, the chief executive, to bring you into it. Not once did you say, what's happening here tonight?
Councillor Roach,
we thought it was getting supported. So, yeah, my question is, why do you think we're not supporting it tonight, Jackie? Any idea?
Councillor, I would be wrong of me to go and second guess and speak for anybody. As I ain't speaking for Ernest and Young, I ain't speaking for nobody. Yeah?
Councillor Alia Khan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question's already been asked by Councillor Rob Roach.
Councillor Moore.
Right, I think it's best we get back to the motion that was initially moved. The key is about the want to dispute some of these recommendations, surely. Jackie's made it quite clear that these accounts are for the year 2018-19. Therefore, surely these recommendations are based on the position at the end of that financial year. Her answer tonight about why to dispute these recommendations have mainly been due to things that have been changed in the period since then, as she has made quite clear to Councillor Franks. If change has been made since then, whether we as members actually agree with the changes that have been made or not, surely the recommendation was true at that point in time and should therefore be admitted rather than be disputed.
I think it's a fair question and a fair challenge, but we're making the decision now in the year when it's 2024-25, and we're not in the space of 18-19 or 19-20. If the reports had come then, I would have said yeah, but we're not then, we are now. That's just my perspective, drawing on the years I did do finance in financial management and all that. All what happened, COVID, was all post-balance sheet events. It was as soon as it happened, I knew we were dealing with post-balance sheets events. And that's what took place. So they made their decision, and I'm in no way in a position to question why they done it now and didn't do it then. To me, it would have made more sense if they did bring the public interest report earlier, because it would have been more relevant to the time that they were reporting on. It may not be a good enough answer for you, but for me, it's about time. If it had been 18, 19, 19, 20, 21, 20, you know, as we came out of the pandemic, that would have been fair. But I don't think they had the resources then to do the audit. Yeah, what affected us affected them. So that's my perspective on it. I felt it would have been more justifiable to have done this report a few years ago. Because if you look on the value for money audit, they've got a table at the back. We were still in red, just as we came out the pandemic. There are 5 areas where we've got red. So it would have been more justifiable then to do it, not how many years later. But that's my educated view based on lived experience.
Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? There was a hand on this side. Okay. Okay, so Councillor Franks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's start, shall we, on a subject where we actually fully agree with the Chair of Audit and Governance Committee. She's absolutely right. Lots of local authorities are having trouble getting their their accounts signed off, largely due to a lack of capacity in the audit industry, if you like to call it that. But lots of authorities have not had a public interest report issued by their auditors. Also, much light was made of the independent report from the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. But in fact, of course, amongst the comments that report did make, it was complaining about the lack of a plan to deal with the continuing £8 million gap in the medium-term financial plan. I would hardly call that a complimentary comment. Much of this dispute started over differences in the valuations, for example, of the airport as an asset and the treatment of the expenditure on the preparation of the development consent order and the Century Park access road. I don't know whether those latter two have been resolved. What I do know is I was not exactly impressed with the confusion over the valuation of the airport as an asset. The confusion arose because there seemed to be differences of opinion over whether what was being valued was the airport as an asset or the value of the council's investment in its airport company as the owner of the airport. And there was a huge difference. The airport as an asset is worth a huge amount of money more than the company that owns it, largely because the company that owns it is lumbered with a £500 million debt. So it stands to reason that the freehold of the airport is going to be worth more money than the value of the council's shareholding in the company. Let's just reflect on some recent figures, well, I say recent, the last 18 months or so, that have been in the news. And you may say this has nothing to do with the report that's in front of us, but it has. It has. When the two gentlemen petrol station owners from the north of England took over the Asda supermarket chain, there were comments critical of the deal made by eminent and expert financial journalists that it wasn't a good deal because it was going to leave the company with a debt to top line earnings ratio of 4.5 terms. And indeed, the company is now in difficulties precisely because of that. Debenhams went broke because its debt to top-line earnings ratio was about 5 times, and it went bust. Have a look at London Luton Airport Limited. Not looking at its current profitability, because that's unfair. That's looking at through a period when the business has been depressed, and in fact for some time the airport was closed. Compare the company's debt with its historical earnings, and it's not 4.5 times, it's not 5 times, it's 12 times. I would call that an alarming statistic. I really would. As for Audit Committee, I really cannot see why in the 7 months while this whole issue has rumbled on and on and on, the Audit Committee have only had 1 report, and that was just 7 months ago. I don't actually, that on its own to me would suggest there is something wrong with the financial management of the council. We've had 1 official complaint which has been dismissed, and the Chair of Audit Committee hasn't satisfactorily explained what she's hoping for from the new complaint. It's watch this space, wait and see, isn't it? The so-called answers that we've received this evening are not answers at all. They are at best prevarications.
There is a time limit on this speaking to the motion, and you've exceeded the time, so you will have to stop there.
Just 1 more sentence, Madam Mayor, and I'll sit down. It has to be said that while all this has been going on, we need to look at the Ernst & Young fee for auditing, which was fixed at £94,000, a big sum. Partly due to this continuing dispute, it's gone up by £421,000, so it's now £515,000. I don't think this dispute has done the council and its taxpayers any favours at all.
Councillor Skeppelhorn, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I said this at Audit and Governance. This started as a small dispute between the council's auditors, the airport company's auditors, and the council as to whether certain elements of the DCO should have been capitalised. It's blown up to a position where the working relationship between Ernst & Young and the council broke down to an incredible system, and it got to the point where instead of dealing with the situation, claim and counterclaim were made, arguments were had, and we spent Audit Governance watching the Ernst & Young lady and the Chief Executive exchanging comments which were frankly not professional on either side, and this whole thing has blown up to a point where it's now costing, as it's been pointed out, an extra £421,000 to this council. It was an issue that should never have happened, and I do hope that the working relationship between the council's new auditors and officers will be put back on a proper footing, And I don't disagree that Ernst & Young were a big part of the problem, but the working relationship between the two teams did break down to a point where it was almost impossible for them to work together. And I hope that we can come back to a proper working relationship with the Council's new auditors. Thank you.
Councillor Amjad Ali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hopefully I won't take too long. My comments are in consideration to the recommendation point 2. But before I begin on that, can I commend the Labour group on their scripted question and answer session? I think that was probably the most cohesive we've received so far this evening. So in terms of the recommendations that are put before us, we're asked to accept recommendations 4 and 5 and dispute the other recommendations. Just a few comments on that. On recommendation 1, this includes more openness with the Luton public, more effective risk management and improved accountability. I believe, and I'm sure my group will back me up on this, that we believe that the EY, Ernst & Young, are actually correct in this, that even looking at the answers I've received today, there is definitely more accountability and openness that is required from this council. In terms of recommendation point 2, to address the reasons for high staff turnover in the LBC Finance Department, I don't believe that there is a significant problem with staff retention in the Finance Department. Therefore, again, I would agree with Ernst & Young on that. And recommendation 3, improve the financial governance arrangements. The key actions are have already been taken. But to be honest, when you look at most of the members, whether they are sufficiently trained in local authority accounts, when you look at some of our members that are sitting in some of these councils, they don't even say anything. And I very much doubt that they'll be in a position to actually fully understand the accounts in themselves. So therefore, my personal recommendation and recommendation that I will pass on to my group is to reject point 2 of the recommendations and to vote against it. Thank you.
Ghulam Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm really surprised about Councillor Franks. I've been on the Finance and Review Committee with Councillor Franks for nearly 18 months. I've also been on shareholders group with Councillor Franks for 18 months. And he has had an update about the these accounts from the Section 151 officer every meeting. And in fact, we had the discussion about this report. It was raised at the last Finance Review meeting last week, and Councillor Franks, who's the chair of it, was quite happy to say he's glad to draw a line under all of this. It puts something to bed and move on. So now, surprised he's raising all these issues. Either that was a different Councillor Franks, or he's just woken up. And same with shareholders. I mean, he's never ever raised in shareholders the debt to ratio of Luton Rising, and we get to see the accounts every quarter there, and we get to there. So I'm really surprised he's raising this now. So I just wonder what's going on there. What I also wanted to make members aware is the context of what's happening in the sector. The sector is broken. It's completely obliterated. The Institute of Chartered Accountants said last year there was only 101 accountants that were capable of auditing council accounts. Guess how many councils we have in the country? 317. So you can see why it's in a crisis. And just to give you a bit, there's 900 sets of accounts of councils and other public bodies that have not been audited since 2017. That is diabolical. That's a system that's broken. And do you know what caused that? The abolition of the Audit Commission. And that was a Tory idea from Eric Pickles back in 2015 to privatise the auditing of councils. And look at the mess we're in. And the reason I reckon this report has come out, and I don't know if the members across the floor are actually following what's going on, but the government consulted on what to do with such a horrendous backlog. And you know what they've done? They've set a deadline for the 13th of December 2024 for all accounts up to 22-23 to be cleared. And they've got to amend regulations to allow accountants to give, a disclaimer audit opinion. What does that mean? So I don't know. I think we just need to move on, accept the recommendations here, accept this motion and move on and draw a line. And this was 6 years ago. We're still operating. We've not gone bust. And therefore, we're doing a good job. So let's move on.
Councillor Jackie Burnett, would you like to respond to any of that?
Madam Mayor, I think we've said it all. I think we've had a good debate. Everybody got it in the public. And my colleague, you summarised it well. What can I say? Let's go to the vote, I would say, if you don't mind me saying, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. So the motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the proposal? Yes, Madam Mayor.
And in doing so, I rise to ask that the published record of individual votes be included in the minutes. I ask my colleagues to rise in support of that proposal.
Indeed. We will now take a publicly recorded vote. You may take your seat.
Didn't it? Interesting.
Madam Mayor, so going to the recorded vote, Councillor Abbas. Councillor Adjijoli. For. Councillor Amjad Ali.
Against.
Councillor Ambier.
Abstain.
Councillor Baker. Councillor Fatima Begum.
For.
Councillor Yaron Begum.
For.
Councillor Burnett.
For.
Councillor Chowdhury.
For.
Councillor Farouk.
For.
Councillor Franks.
Against.
Councillor Fry.
Against.
Councillor Hanif.
For.
Councillor J. Hussain.
For.
Councillor J. I. Hussain. Councillor M. Hussain.
For.
Councillor S. Hussain.
For.
Councillor Isles. Councillor Ali Khan.
For.
Councillor Aslam Khan.
Against.
Councillor Latif. Councillor Mahmood.
For.
Councillor A. Malik. Councillor K. Malik. Councillor R. Malik.
For.
Councillor Marshall. Councillor Mead.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
For.
Councillor Moore.
Against.
Councillor Nazir.
For.
Councillor Roche.
For.
Councillor Salim.
For.
Councillor Shaw. Councillor Simmons.
For.
Councillor Skeppelhorn.
Against.
Councillor Steer.
For.
Councillor Stevens. Councillor D. Taylor.
For.
Councillor J. Taylor.
For.
Councillor Underwood. Councillor Wynne.
Against.
The motion is carried. The next item is agenda item 11.1, Scrutiny Annual Report 2023 to 24, set out on pages 102 to 123. I call upon Councillor Wynne to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just before I move the motion, I would like to thank all of the members of the scrutiny committees from across all groups within this council. I believe that the way that scrutiny has operated in general across the whole of the year has been excellent. I think there has been, in most occasions, no undue bias from any of the groups, and I think that is to be commended. I would also like to thank all of the individual chairs of all the scrutiny groups and indeed any of the task and finish groups. So having said that, I would like to propose the recommendation that can be found on page 102. And the recommendation is that this council is recommended to note the scrutiny annual report that is attached at Appendix A of this meeting report. Thank you.
Is the motion seconded?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is a report and a review of the political balance on the membership of committees following the by-election held in Barnfield and Wigmore Ward on the 26th of September, are set out on pages 124 to 126. I call upon Councillor Simmons to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the recommendations that's set out in paragraph 2, 1 and 2.2 on page 38, and I invite Amjad Ali to further move the changes that are to be made to the membership of the relevant committees, panels and pools in accordance with the wishes of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Hazel. I'll move the following changes to the membership of the relevant committees, panels and pools. Councillor Adris Latif be added to the membership of the various panels and pools. To the membership of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, fill the vacancies on the Overview and Scrutiny Board, Scrutiny Children's Services Review Group, and the Children Health and and the Scrutiny Health and Social Care Review Group. I further move that Councillor Anwar Malik be added to the membership of the various panels and pools. The membership of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, fill the vacancies on the Licensing and Standards Committees, and replace Councillor Zahor Ahmed on the Scrutiny and Finance Review Group. I further move that Councillor Zahor Ahmed fill the vacancy on the Taxi and Private Hire Licensing Committee. Thank you.
Is the motion seconded?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Are there any questions? Any recommendations? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is a report inviting the participation of the Council in a joint health overview and scrutiny committee to consider proposals for Mount Vernon Cancer Care are set out on pages 127 to 128. I call upon Councillor Underwood to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the recommendations set out at paragraphs 2.1 to 2.2 on page 127.
The motion seconded. Okay. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item of business is the notice of motion set out at agenda item 13.1. This motion is submitted on behalf of the Liberal Democrats and Labour groups as a combined motion on the topic of fireworks. The motion will be moved by Councillor Fry and seconded by Councillor Hanif. I call upon Councillor Fry to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The motion set before you, which I'm sure you've all seen in accordance with Standing Order 14.1, asks all councillors here present to agree to lobbying the British Government to follow the Scottish Government's example and provide local councils powers to introduce controlled times and zones when fireworks cannot be set off unless part of a licensed firework display, and to introduce noise restrictions on firework use. The rationale behind this proposal is in the interests of all people of Luton, and therefore it's not a political one. Fireworks are a very popular means of celebrating special occasions and are loved by a great number of people, not only in Luton, but across the globe. Bonfire night, New Year's Eve, Diwali, Chinese New Year, Eid and weddings are at the heart of such events where they draw together communities and families with much loved and entertaining spectacles. However, for some people, fireworks are a blight on their lives. The run-up period to the planned events, where fireworks are at the heart of a celebration, can be an extremely stressful period for many. Each year, councillors hear complaints about inconsiderate times when fireworks are set off, not only late into the early hours of the morning, but also during the day. The elderly, neurodivergent, PTSD sufferer, and animals can be particularly hard hit. Imagine being woken up disorientated at 1 a.m. in the morning to a loud set of explosions. Now consider being a refugee from a war zone, where being woken in the night could be a matter of life and death. What should be an entertaining event is now a cruel part of a PTSD episode. Now, admittedly, this is an extreme case, but for any PTSD sufferer or neurodivergent person, loud noises are terrifying and overwhelming sensory events. Hiding, covering ears, crying and screaming at the bangs and pops is part of their lives, not just on the celebration night itself, but for the weeks leading up to those events, where inconsiderate people think it's fun to set off fireworks for 1, 2, 3 or 4 weeks on the run-up to the celebration itself. On top of that, the anxiety at the very thought of what can happen can be a very real experience for the neurodivergent. Most neurodivergent PTSD sufferers, elderly or pet-owning public, will not say they don't want people having fun, but it is their human right to live in a safe environment where they don't have to wear noise defenders, take calming medicines or sleeping pills just to get through the fireworks season. With the ever-increasing numbers of both children and adults being diagnosed with neurodivergent conditions and our growing elderly population, these issues can only worsen. One thing we can all be sure of is we will all grow older. The Scottish Government recognise the right of the individual, pets or livestock. They've created a framework that limits the sale of fireworks. For example, on Bonfire Night, it's from the 29th of October to the 5th of November. Restrictions limiting the days fireworks can be set off not only limits the time those seriously affected by fireworks can be affected, but it also allows them to plan ahead and build in strategies to make their lives calmer. By reducing the noise of fireworks from 120 to 90 decibels, or introducing legislation to ensure fireworks are labelled as loud or low noise, consumers can make an informed choice about what they're purchasing. Last year, the NHS published that there was advice sought for firework-related burns every 21 seconds during the Bonfire Night celebration. Removing fireworks from public sale and into the hands of qualified and licensed experts will make these times safer. This should also apply to private events such as weddings. By advertising licensed firework events, the public will be given an opportunity to appeal against the licensing of such events, or if granted, be given the opportunity to make provision for their pets or vulnerable adults. Actively promoting public awareness about the impact of fireworks have on animals or the vulnerable in society may actually encourage individuals to respect and mitigate risks, whilst informing residents about how to report offenders to the police. By lobbying government to follow the Scottish example on fireworks, we will not only give power to local authorities to limit the fireworks, but also support the ever-increasing numbers of residents who complain about antisocial fireworks blighting their lives. I now call upon the members of Council here present to vote in favour of the motion.
Is the motion seconded?
So, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to start off by playing this. That, Madam Mayor, is the sound that woke me up at midnight, trying to get some rest before I went to work. So, with this, I would like to second this motion where I'd like to address an issue which affects many of us here in Luton. Fireworks being set off in the middle of the night. They can be beautiful, but they are also a major nuisance when used irresponsibly. So, like Councillor Fry said, imagine you're settling in for the night, struggling to put your young children to sleep, elderly or ill relatives, and even your pets. I've got 2 little cats. But suddenly, loud bangs, bright flashes disturb the peace. For many, this can be deeply distressing. Pets become frightened, babies wake up, having taken forever to get them to sleep, and those who work early shifts or late shifts have difficulty sleeping, are left exhausted.
Beyond the disruption to our daily lives, there's also a safety concern. Fireworks can be dangerous when set off improperly or without warning, posing risks to property and people alike. And when they are used in the middle of the night, there's little time to react if something goes wrong. There is strict legislation around the sale and use of fireworks. However, this recording was made when there was a family celebrating a wedding. They set them off, but by the time you call the emergency services, the police, when they're there, it's over. So with this motion, what we're proposing is prevention, because prevention is better than cure. Because at the moment, according to Fireworks Regulation 2004 and the Pyrotechnics Article Safety Regulations 2015, it is illegal to set off fireworks in public places such as streets and parks, something which happens regularly in the town's many wedding venues. So fireworks can only be used on private property, such as gardens. The law restricts when fireworks can be set off. Generally, it is illegal to set off fireworks between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., with certain exceptions, as Councillor Fry just mentioned earlier. So as it stands, also the fireworks can only be sold by registered sellers during specific periods. And again, I support in calling this motion to restrict legislation so that the residents of this town, with their many different needs, are protected. So it is important to remember that while fireworks are a tradition, our community's well-being should come first. We can enjoy fireworks responsibly without causing unnecessary stress to our neighbours. With that, I would like to second this motion.
Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Okay, we'll take Councillor Skeppelhorn first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The number of times I've had conversations with friends and residents and constituents about irresponsible fireworks. And we're not talking about the pretty ones. We're talking about what amounts to the loud bangs. They do nothing but make a bang. They set off at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning for no apparent reason. They've even started now setting them off in the middle of the day. So there is no possible way that these fireworks are for display. They are for causing nuisance. I strongly believe that fireworks should now be in publicly regulated official displays and not for, or if it's for a wedding, then it should be somebody who is authorised to set off fireworks. When I lived in New Zealand some 30, 40 years ago, the rules there were quite clear. You could sell fireworks for the week before bonfire night and not a day after. It was simple as that. 1 week worth of fire. They didn't have them for weddings and they didn't have them for other events. But you were only allowed a week's worth of selling of fireworks. So other countries understand how to limit the sale of fireworks, and it has got to a point where we are dealing with, let's call them what they are, yobbos, firing off bangers just for the sake of it, and it has got to stop. It's disturbing the lives of the majority of the people of this town, and we have to try and do something to help them and support them. So I support this motion.
Javed Hussain.
I want to raise
Councillor Aslam Khan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Celebrating is never discouraged in this town, especially with weddings and any events, but there's a way and a manner that we should all celebrate. For the past 10 years, there's been a growing culture where we've seen fireworks on the streets, fireworks in the gardens, we've seen fires lit up, we've seen people's houses damaged, we've seen people on the streets coming in the way of traffic with near misses and accidents. If this continues, we know that there's going to be fatal consequences. It could result into of horrific injuries or deaths or burning of homes. And this has to stop. And there's a number of ways. It's not just about passing motions. It's about doing practical things to make this, to bring this to an end. And I think it starts from every one of us. And we have to champion, we have advocate and educate people, but also those mosques and those churches and everybody there. We are all part of it. We often attend these weddings. We witness it. But yet we do nothing. And I think, there has to be, in some cases, there may be some public pressure, but it has to be enforcement in place. And this is where our MPs need to do some work. We know we've got limitations here locally. This is bread and butter for MPs' work. They need to be going and passing these legislations in the Parliament. And we haven't seen any action, and I hope that they take this on board and run away with it. Thank you so much.
Okay, Councillor Ambia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to strongly support this motion because it's a illegal fireworks. This issue is all over the town, and this fireworks is not only disturbing our day-to-day life, it's also distracting our sleeping pattern and on all the animals, etc. But also, it's a health and safety issue because it causes fires and it will cause a fire hazard, etc. So, and also in order to to tackle this one, it's not only for the policing job. We need to raise the awareness to our community to tackle this illegal fireworks activities issue. So I strongly support this motion and would like to raise an awareness through the council, through these local MPs, make it the community and social awareness. What is we need to tell the people what is the causing problem to others. People maybe unconsciously celebrate, for this, they don't understand or they don't feel like, I don't know how much impact cause the animals and, other residents. Thank you.
Councillor Hazel Simmons.
Assure my colleague, the other side of the room, that our MPs are very active. Labour MPs are very active on this subject, particularly Sarah Owen, who I believe is actually speaking on the issue of fireworks next week. So just watch and see what they're up to.
Thank you for that clarity, Hazel. So Councillor Amjad Ali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For once, we actually have a joint motion, which is really good. So thank you to... Well, so I'm sure that there won't be anyone that will be voting against this. But I'd just like to reiterate that we do have I forgot the operation's name now, but the police have committed to actually doing something about this, and I think as a council we do need to hold them accountable and make sure that they are following up on their commitments. And in terms of where we are, I mean, we're limited as a council, but really this is a legal matter, and that needs to be reinforced by the police. They have drones, they should have the capacity, to be honest. I mean, there's about £25 million that have been raised through increase of precepts, and every time a precept is raised, we're promised that there's going to be more local policing. So, it's about time they actually put their money where their mouth is and go on with things. But that'll be all for now, and thank you very much to everyone for actually supporting both the combined motion.
Councillor Fry, would you like to respond to any of that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's very reassuring and very heartening that we've actually come together to put forward this motion and second it together. And I'm very pleased to hear that our MPs are very much working in favour of getting rid of the firework blight that is on this town. Thank you.
The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the motion? The motion is carried. The next item of business is the notice of motion set out at agenda item 13.2 on the agenda. I call upon Councillor Stevens to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like firstly to give my thanks to the officers Sean Askins and Anthony Swift for their technical advice and support in moving this motion forward, as they considered it was a rational way to continue the debate, if you like. I wanted to give us a voice nationally in this debate about e-scooters. I do understand that some years ago we had an opportunity to take part in the trial and have rental scooters within Luton, and it seemed to be a retrograde step that we didn't actually go forward and take part. But nevertheless, hopefully that could still take place in the coming future. E-scooters have the potential to improve local air quality, reduce road congestion, greenhouse gas emission, and help to meet the government's carbon emission targets, especially by replacing single-person short car journeys. There are 30 government-sponsored e-scooter trials in operation in the UK. They have been successful, and since I put this motion forward, I've been able to glean some extra information which I think is helpful to put out there. Firstly, there have been now 2.3 million total users since the start of the trial until the end of January 2023 across all locations. 34 million total rides since the start of the trial until the end of January 2023 across all locations, and 24,365 total e-scooters in operation as part of the trials. So you might say everything is positive. Is it? Well, the answer to that is no. We have 750,000 owned e-scooters in the UK, and most are used illegally. Many of you will have seen and come across speeding e-scooters, probably in your different parts of the ward. I've been approached both by residents and businesses. Haywood Tyler, the sandwich shop in Cumberland Street, all complained about e-scooters on the road speeding past, causing a major problem. So what else can I say that isn't so positive? Firstly, that UK is one of the last remaining major European economies where private e-scooters are still banned except on private roads. In many countries, they fall outside existing vehicle categories, so they're not prohibited on roads and do not require direct legislation from the government or local authorities. That's the first thing. Secondly, we have rather onerous restrictions on the use of, even in the rental trial areas. The riders have got to hold a driving licence, wear a helmet, and they limit speeds to 15.5 miles per hour and have automatic lights. Secondly, the last government said it would legalise e-scooters in 2022. Well, it didn't happen. They did it. And now we've had four extensions of the trials. And again, now it's been extended to 2026. Furthermore, there was no mention of e-scooters or micro-mobility in the current King's speech. That has upset the industry. There was an open letter sent by the coalition of 14 major organisations, both the rentalers and the transport charities, that was sent to the Transport Secretary, Louise Haig, and her ministers. They called for private e-scooters to be given a legal class because it's the only solution for unregulated private e-scooters. But that could also cover e-bikes. Secondly, to provide a standard set of technical specifications and safety standards which would help regulate the private e-scooter sector. And thirdly, prioritise micro-mobility, so create a low-powered, zero-emission vehicle class which could also pave the way for other modes of transport, including the e-bikes, but also such other forms of transport such as electric wheelchairs. James Bolton, the head of Voi UK, which is one of the world's fastest growing mobility companies in the world, confirmed that they have committed to the UK by investing in warehouses, staff and e-scooters. We don't want to lose the industry. We don't want to lose the investment. In fact, we cannot afford to lose that. We did have the opportunity, had we taken action earlier, to be one of the front runners in the world in this kind of area. In fact, if you were to purchase or use an e-scooter, almost 100% of those are actually manufactured overseas. With the extension to 2026, it does provide an ideal opportunity for more flexibility and a further expansion of trials. It will allow existing trial renters to extend their fleet sizes and widen their service area and extend the trials. It will also open up the opportunity to a range of people and locations, including those in suburban areas and market towns that aren't having the opportunity to take advantage of this environmental transportation, and where they also are suffering from forms of transport in short supply. It opens up the opportunity for businesses to be part of the rental scheme, so that they could look at local sustainability of freight delivery. And it will also provide an opportunity in assisting perhaps with the transport of certain disability groups. But moreover, we should take into account that we're depriving one section of the community who could still be taking part in the trials by insisting that they have to have driving licenses. Interestingly, the House of Commons Transport Committee report that was issued at the end of 2022 stated that should the government legalise e-scooters following the trials, users should not be required to have a driving licence, either for rental or for private use. And that's consistent with practice in other places around the world. This was also reiterated by Richard Dilks, Chief Executive of Como UK, one of the leading mobility transport companies, who said on the basis that one serious accident occurs in every 500,000 scooter type trips, e-scooters should not be necessary. I've just got a message from my colleague saying I should wrap up because it's late in the day. So let me just wrap up then. There's great opportunity for the government to get all the data at the end of 2026 from all the trials that are taking place. We can also look to other companies, to other countries who have plenty of experience. And I'll just point out that Spain have now introduced quite stringent regulations. Perhaps we should look at their model. They are only going to allow one person onto a scooter at any one time. The use of earphones whilst on a scooter is going to be prohibited. The use of mobile phones or driving under the influence of alcohol and or drugs will be also
Councillor
against
Stevens,
the rules.
you're exceeding your time. Could you just finish?
So-
Could you just wrap up?
So at the end of the day, I urge you to support the motion.
Is the motion seconded?
Very concisely seconded, ma'am.
Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Keep your hands up. Okay. Keep your hands up until I've acknowledged you. Councillor Burnett. Okay. So we'll start with Councillor Yaqub Hanif.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so despite all of that, I still don't understand what is it you're asking. But seriously, on a serious note, a couple of years ago, a young Asian man in his late 20s died when his e-scooter hit a pothole opposite the Chiltern Hotel at Dunstable Road. And as I was making my way across St George's Square, I nearly got run over by an e-scooter. Okay, so to quote somebody from the recent government is, how are you going to pay for this? Right? Who's going to police it? Just look at recent reports on the BBC. Line bikes have been dumped everywhere. Okay, illegal modifications. The police have been spending a lot of valuable time. We just had a debate about community policing. Valuable police time has been rediverted to policing these scooters, which have illegal modifications. One of these e-bikes that can be bought legally can be modified to go up to speeds above 70 miles an hour. Okay, so there's that where we need to factor. And again, my question is, what is it you're asking for? Okay, and how is it going to be enforced? Now, if you want to make lanes across pedestrian high streets that we've produced to have a cleaner airspace in our town centre, how are you going to make these lanes? Who's going to, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to police it? How are we going to make sure the public doesn't get run over? Okay, and how are we going to get the checks done on these? Because at the moment, as the police, commissioner will tell you, the police chiefs, other community safety organisations will tell you, the death on two wheels. And just to wrap up, I just think it's a very bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Ghulam Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I'm not sure, Councillor Stevens. I know he believes we on this side don't read our papers, but actually we do. And I've actually read the government's evaluation report, and I think you must have been reading it through rose-tinted glasses, because you've given us all the positive bit, but what you haven't covered is some of the other issues that arise. And I'll just go through some of them. I don't believe these trials are actually promoting equality, because they're saying most of the users are 71% male and under 35. Only 12% of ethnic minorities are actually using those scooters. And actually, those that use them are from a higher income bracket compared to those from a poorer and disadvantaged background. And also, these trials in disadvantaged areas are saying they actually lead to more underage users and lead to a lot more antisocial behaviour. They're confusing people, because those that are illegal are actually thinking, because they've got this trial, it's okay to now use it on the pavement, and they're actually causing more problems. And like my colleague, Councillor Yaqub has said, it's actually enforcement has been diabolical and inconsistent, because the police just do not have the resources to police it. So I don't know what Councillor Stevens is asking for. I wonder whether he's even thought about the costs of all of this to the council, given where our budget and where our pressures lie. So I definitely do not support his motion, and I think the rest of the members shouldn't do it either, and I think we just need to move on. It's getting quite late.
I second that. So it is getting late, and we do need to move on. And we have been in our seats for 3 hours now. So can I ask people to be very concise? And if points have been made before, don't labour them. Just make a quick point. So, Councillor Javed Hussain. Councillor Jackie Burnett.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Councillor Bassett, fire. I just found this out, yeah. London Fire Brigade, e-bikes and e-scooters are London's fastest growing fire trend. And there's been coverage on the news about lithium batteries. We've got vapes causing fire, this caused fire, and the fire service, like the police, has not been properly resourced, and there are council workers getting burnt with lithium. I do not support this, but I just wanted to make the point on fire, that technology is moving faster than we can keep up with, and prevention's better than cure. So I'm just keeping it, fire, don't need no more. Oh, and I've been told by the fire people that any lithium battery, you need to just walk away. Don't even try and extinguish it. Exit and leave it. So, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Coming back onto your point, very interestingly, the railway has actually banned the use of e-scooters and carrying e-scooters for that exact reason, the fear of fires within trains. Coming on to a point you made about licences, I've been to Los Angeles where it's very popular. And let me tell you, you do need a licence. You need a licence in a lot of places. So I don't know where this idea that most of the world you don't need a licence comes from. Now, I have reservations about the safety concerns. TfL, for example, in 2020 reported there were 57 injuries and 13 serious injuries. When they introduced the trial, this jumped up to 223 injuries and 63 serious injuries. That's a huge jump. That's 4 times the amount as soon as trials started. Equally, Kent dropped their trials early for the same reasons, for safety concerns. Lastly, should we really be encouraging e-scooters in a town where 2/3 of people are overweight or obese? It doesn't send a good image from this council, frankly.
Councillor Ambier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I disagree this motion because I think my other colleagues has already mentioned, because e-scooter creates a health and safety hazard for the drivers and other pedestrians, also causes fires. We had, there was a various incidents all over the countries, because of the electric charger, it causes fires. Then also another thing is it will allow to increase the antisocial behavior, because criminals, they will take advantage to use the e-scooter because it's a very, and also it is a very unrestricted about who's eligible to drive. The young people can drive without helmet, without high vis, then police can't trace them because of the help. That will allow them to take the advantage to the criminal activities through the e-scooter. Then also another thing is, it is a very hard to regulate, and in terms of, we have
Point of order, Madam Mayor. These points have been made.
Yeah, so we have lots of policing issues. So I think, this is a, bad idea. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Stevens, would you like to respond in a concise fashion?
I take all these points. Because I wrapped up quickly, because I realised it was late, there were some of the arguments that I wasn't able to include. The idea for legislation is to be able to cover these points. It is to be able to cover the issues of enforcement. I do understand at the moment the police are in a difficult position. They do not know how to deal with e-bikes and e-scooters, and they are reluctant to chase people because it can lead to an accident. That bit I know. What I was going to go on to say was that the government needs to be able to legislate on the minimum age for use. Does there need to be training required, rider training? Should helmets and insurance be compulsory?
Councillor Stevens, just one moment. So your time expired initially, and you're now being given the opportunity to respond to the points made on the floor. So could you focus your response to the responses?
Yeah, let me stick to the point, and let me answer some of the questions. On the trials, there are certain standards that have been set on construction And those trials means that the scooters do not go back into people's houses. They're supposed to go back into the dock where they're recharged. That's the first thing. So the trouble is with scooters that are causing fires, it's probably to do with manufactured cheap ones that are coming from overseas. And the point that I made, because we haven't invested in this area, we are not producing high-quality standard e-bikes in this country. That's one of the things I would say. I think if we're burying our heads in the sand if we decide not to take part in this kind of technology, because it is expanding around the world. Solutions are being found, and if we're just going to say that we're not going to take part, then I regret.
Thank you. The motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the proposal?
I want a recorded vote. I'd like to request a recorded vote.
Hands raised for recorded votes. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'll now go to a recorded vote. Councillor Abbas. Councillor Adejoli.
Against.
Councillor A. Ali.
For.
Councillor Ambier.
Against.
Councillor Baker. Councillor F. Begum.
Against.
Councillor Y. Begum.
Against.
Councillor Bennett.
Against.
Councillor Chowdhury.
Against.
Councillor Farouk.
Against.
Councillor Franks.
For.
Councillor Fry.
Abstain.
Councillor Hanif.
Against.
Councillor J. Hussain.
Against.
Councillor J. I. Hussain.
Against.
Councillor M. Hussain. Councillor S. Hussain.
Against.
Councillor Isles.
Against.
Councillor Ali Khan. Councillor Aslam Khan. Councillor Latif. Councillor Mahmood.
Against.
Councillor Malik. Councillor A. Malik. Councillor R. Malik. Councillor Marshall. Councillor Mead.
For.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Nazir.
Against.
Councillor Roche.
Against.
Councillor Salim.
Against.
Councillor Shaw. Councillor Simmons.
Against.
Councillor Skeppelhorn. Councillor Steer.
Against.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor D. Taylor.
Against.
Councillor J. Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Underwood. Councillor Wynne.
Abstain.
The motion is lost. That concludes the business for this meeting. I thank you for your attendance and a safe journey home.